Can you believe that a woman rejected by the world could become the queen of the most powerful kingdom in the north? Tonight, I will tell you the story of Elira Valmer, the unwanted girl, despised by her own family, yet admired by all the nobles. But then a king entered the cosmic ballroom, and everything changed forever. Tune in to find out what she did to rise from the ashes and ascend to the throne. Don't forget to like and comment where you're watching. The grand ballroom of House Valmir blazed with 1,000 candles, their flames reflecting off gilded mirrors and crystal chandeliers that hung like frozen waterfalls from the vaulted ceiling. The midsummer ball was the event of the season, perhaps the event of the decade, and every noble family within 3 kingdoms had sent their finest representatives. Silk gowns and jewel tones swirled across the marble floor as couples danced to the orchestra's sweeping melodies. Laughter rang out like silver bells. Wine flowed freely from fountains carved to resemble leaping wolves. The air itself seemed to shimmer with magic and possibility. But Elira Valmir felt none of it. She stood pressed against a marble pillar near the eastern wall, trying to make herself as small and invisible as possible. Her gown, a dull gray thing borrowed from a distant cousin who'd outgrown it years ago, hung loose on her slender frame. While every other woman in the room sparkled with diamonds and sapphires, Elira wore no jewelry except a thin silver chain her mother had given her before dying. The chain had been her mother's only possession, and Elira clutched it now like a lifeline. Around her the nobles of House Valmir held court with visiting dignitaries. Her father, Lord Aldrich Valmir, stood at the center of a circle of admirers, his chest puffed out with pride as he gestured expansively. Beside him, draped in emerald silk that matched her eyes, was Celindra, Elira's older sister and the acknowledged jewel of the family. Celindra was everything Elira was not. Tall where Elira was average, voluptuous where Elira was slim, confident and commanding where Elira was quiet and reserved. Most importantly, Celindra had shifted into her wolf form on her 16th birthday, as all proper wolves did. The transformation had been magnificent, witnesses said, a sleek golden wolf with eyes like green fire. Elira had never shifted at all. At 22 years old, she remained locked in human form, unable to access the wolf that should have been her birthright. In a society where one's wolf determined one's worth, this made her less than nothing. An embarrassment, a stain on the family honor. There you are, sister. Cylindra's voice cut through Elira's thoughts like a blade. Hiding in the shadows as usual, how perfectly appropriate. Elira looked up to find Cylindra gliding toward her, 3 other noble ladies trailing in her wake, like ladies-in-waiting attending a queen. Their smiles were sharp and cruel. "I'm not hiding," Elira said quietly. "I'm simply staying out of the way." "Oh, but that's precisely what hiding is, darling." Cylindra's laugh was like breaking glass. "Though I can't blame you. If I were dressed in that tragic excuse for a gown, I'd hide too." The other ladies tittered. One of them, Lady Morgana from House Blackthorn, leaned in conspiratorially. "Is it true she still hasn't shifted? At her age?" "It's true," Cylindra confirmed with mock sadness. "Poor Elira. 22 years old and still no wolf. Father had her examined by 3 different shamans, you know. They all said the same thing. There's something fundamentally broken inside her." The words struck Elira like physical blows, but she kept her expression carefully neutral. She'd learned long ago that showing pain only encouraged them. "How tragic," murmured another lady, though her eyes gleamed with malicious delight. "No wonder no one's asked her to dance." "No one would dare," Cylindra said airily. "Can you imagine the scandal of being seen with her? Why, it would be social suicide. Even the lowest-ranking wolves won't touch her. I heard that Marcus Greystone, you know, the baker's son, actually ran away when Father suggested a match." This was true, though the truth was more complicated. Marcus Greystone had been a kind boy who'd shown Elira genuine friendship when they were children, but when Lord Aldrich had proposed a marriage alliance, clearly desperate to marry off his defective daughter to anyone who would take her, Marcus's parents had rejected the offer immediately. A half-blood for their promising son? Never. The memory still burned. "Perhaps she's not meant to have a mate at all," Lady Morgana suggested. "Perhaps nature itself is rejecting her." "Oh, I'm certain of it," Cylindra purred. She turned to face Elira directly, her beautiful face twisted with contempt. "Tell me, sister, How does it feel to be the girl no one wants? To be so fundamentally unworthy that not even common wolves will have you? Alira's fingers tightened on her mother's necklace. She could feel the eyes of nearby nobles turning toward them, sensing drama. The music seemed to fade. A hush was falling over their section of the ballroom. "I don't need anyone to want me," Alira said, her voice low but steady. "I'm content as I am." "Content?" Cylindra's laugh rang out again, louder this time. She was performing now, ensuring everyone could hear. "You're content to be a family embarrassment? Content to bring shame on the Valmir name? Content to be nothing?" "That's enough, Cylindra." "No, I don't think it is enough." Cylindra's voice rose, carrying across the ballroom. Heads were turning now, conversations dying. "I think it's time everyone here understood exactly what you are. You're not a wolf. You're barely even human. You're a mistake, a cosmic joke, and the kindest thing you could do for this family would be to disappear entirely." The words hung in the air like poison. Alira felt her cheeks burning, felt the weight of 100 stares pressing down on her. She wanted to run, to flee this nightmare, but her legs wouldn't move. She was frozen, pinned in place by humiliation. Then something shifted in the air. It was subtle at first, just a change in the quality of the silence, the kind of hush that falls when something dangerous enters a room. Alira felt it before she understood it, a prickling along her spine, a sudden warmth spreading through her chest, an invisible thread pulling her attention toward. The doors at the far end of the ballroom swung open. Every head turned. A man stood framed in the doorway, and the word man somehow seemed insufficient to describe him. He was tall, taller than any person Alira had ever seen, with broad shoulders that seemed to fill the space. He wore black from head to toe, black coat, black vest, black trousers, all tailored perfectly to his powerful frame. His hair was dark as midnight, swept back from a face that could have been carved from granite. Sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, eyes that even from across the room seemed to glow with an inner fire. But it was the way he moved that truly set him apart. Each step was controlled, purposeful, predatory. He walked like someone who'd never had to hurry, never had to please, never had to bow to anyone or anything. The crowd parted before him instinctively, nobles stepping back without quite knowing why, their wolves recognizing something their human minds couldn't quite process. This was an apex predator, walking among lesser creatures. "By the moon," someone whispered nearby. "That's him. That's King Darius." The name rippled through the ballroom like a shockwave. King Darius Thorn, the Alpha King of the Northern Dominions. Ruler of the most powerful wolf kingdom in the known world. A man so dangerous, so powerful, that even speaking his name without proper deference was considered reckless. Alira had heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. They said he'd killed his own father in single combat to claim the throne. They said he could shift faster than thought, that his wolf form was enormous and terrible to behold. They said he'd never been bested in battle, never shown mercy to his enemies, never bent knee to any authority but his own will. They also said he'd rejected every potential mate presented to him. Dozens of noble daughters, each more beautiful and accomplished than the last, had been paraded before him over the years. He'd dismissed them all without a second glance, and now he was here, at House Valmir's midsummer ball. Lord Aldrich recovered first, rushing forward with a deep bow. "Your Majesty, what an unexpected honor. We had no idea you would grace us with your presence tonight. If we had known, we would have prepared a proper reception." "I don't require receptions," Darius said, his voice deep and resonant. It carried across the silent ballroom without him having to raise it. "I was in the region and heard you were hosting. I thought I would see for myself what House Valmir had to offer." The implication was clear. He was looking for a mate. The temperature in the room seemed to spike as ambitious fathers and calculating mothers immediately began positioning their daughters. Cylindra, Alira noticed, had gone perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the king with naked hunger. "Of course, Your Majesty." Lord Aldrich was practically trembling with excitement. "Please, allow me to introduce you to the finest ladies of—" But Darius was no longer looking at Lord Aldrich. His gaze was sweeping across the ballroom, those burning eyes examining each face, each form, with the intensity of a hunter selecting prey. Noble daughters straightened their spines, pushed out their chests, arranged their faces into their most alluring expressions. Cylindra, among them, Elira noticed, had somehow managed to position herself directly in the king's line of sight. But his eyes kept moving, kept searching, until they found Elira. The moment their gazes met, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. That warmth in Elira's chest, the one she'd felt when he first entered, suddenly blazed into something bigger, something overwhelming. It was like a rope had been tied around her heart, and someone was pulling it tight, drawing her inexorably toward this stranger across the room. No, not a stranger. Somehow, impossibly, he felt familiar, like coming home after a long journey, like finding something she hadn't known was lost. Darius's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those dark eyes. Recognition, understanding, and beneath it all, a fierce possessiveness that made Elira's breath catch. He began walking toward her. The crowd parted like water before a ship's prow. Elira could hear the gasps, the confused whispers, could feel Cylindra's shock and rage like heat radiating from the sun, could see her father's face shifting from excitement to confusion to dawning horror as he realized who the king was approaching. Not the golden daughter in emerald silk, the broken one in borrowed gray. Darius stopped directly in front of Elira. Up close he was even more intimidating and more magnificent. His presence was overwhelming, a force of nature contained in human skin. The scent of him filled her nose, pine and smoke and something wild and dangerous. "What is your name?" His voice was softer now, meant only for her. Elira's mouth had gone dry. She had to swallow twice before she could speak. "Elira Valmere, Your Majesty." She waited for him to bow, to show the deference that everyone showed to royalty, but Elira had never been good at pretending. Instead, she met his gaze directly, her chin lifted with stubborn pride. A smile ghosted across his lips. "You don't bow." "Should I?" The words escaped before she could stop them. "Would you respect me more if I did?" Someone nearby gasped at her audacity, but Darius's smile widened. "No," he said. "I would respect you less." He extended his hand, palm up, an invitation, not a command. "Walk with me, Elira Valmere." She stared at that offered hand like it might bite her. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, a cruel joke, some elaborate humiliation orchestrated by her sister or father. Kings didn't notice girls like her. They didn't seek out broken half-bloods hiding against marble pillars. But that warmth in her chest, that invisible thread, was pulling so hard now it almost hurt. Before she could talk herself out of it, Elira placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, and that thread between them seemed to solidify into something unbreakable. The king, the Alpha King of the Northern Dominions, led her across the ballroom floor while the entire assembly watched in stunned silence. They passed Cylindra, whose beautiful face had gone purple with rage, past Lord Aldrich, who looked like he might faint, past dozens of noble ladies who'd spent hours preparing themselves for the king's arrival, only to watch him choose the family embarrassment instead. Darius led her through a set of glass doors and out into the gardens beyond. The night air was cool and sweet, scented with night-blooming jasmine and honeysuckle. A full moon hung low in the sky, so bright it cast shadows across the manicured paths and marble fountains. The sounds of the ballroom faded behind them until there was only the whisper of wind through leaves and the distant call of a nightingale. They walked in silence for several minutes, following a winding path deeper into the gardens. Finally, they reached a secluded clearing where an ancient oak spread its branches like a protective canopy. Beneath it sat a stone bench, weathered by centuries of wind and rain. Darius released her hand and turned to face her properly. In the moonlight, his features seemed sharper, more wolf than man. His eyes definitely glowed now, not metaphorically but literally, with an amber light that had nothing human in it. "Do you know what you are to me?" he asked. Elira's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "No, Your Majesty. My name is Darius, and you—" He took a step closer. "You are my mate." The word hit her like a thunderbolt. Mate. The bond that wolves spoke of in hushed, reverent tones. The connection between souls that transcended choice or logic. The partnership that made two beings into one unified force. "That's impossible," Elira whispered. "I'm not—" I can't. You felt it too. It wasn't a question. When I entered the ballroom, when our eyes met, you felt the bond awakening. She had. She couldn't deny it. That warmth, that pulling sensation, that bone-deep certainty that this man was important, necessary, vital. But I'm nothing, she said, hating how her voice cracked. I'm broken. I can't shift. You are mine. The words were soft but absolute. My wolf recognized yours the moment I crossed the threshold. It doesn't matter that you haven't shifted yet. The bond is older than form, deeper than magic. Your soul called to mine. This doesn't make sense. Elira's mind was reeling. You're a king. You could have anyone. Why would fate choose someone like me? Darius studied her for a long moment, his glowing eyes seeming to see straight through to her core. Tell me something true, he said finally. Something no one else here would say. Something you've never told anyone. The request was so unexpected that Elira answered before she could think better of it. I'm glad I can't shift, she said. The words tumbled out in a rush, like poison she'd been holding in for years. Everyone says it makes me broken, but the truth is, I'm terrified of what I might find if I could. What if I look inside and there's nothing there? What if I'm just empty? At least this way I can tell myself maybe there's something worth finding if I shifted and found nothing. She trailed off, unable to finish. Silence fell between them. Elira braced herself for mockery, for rejection, for confirmation that she truly was as pathetic as everyone said. Instead, Darius reached out and cupped her face in his hands. His palms were warm and calloused, strong enough to crush stone but infinitely gentle against her skin. I have stood in rooms full of nobility, he said quietly, and heard nothing but lies. Flattery masquerading as truth, ambition dressed up as devotion, pretty words with rot underneath. His thumbs traced her cheekbones, and something in his expression softened. But you just spoke more truth in 30 seconds than I've heard in 30 years. I don't understand. No one ever talks to me like I'm just a man, Darius said. They see the crown, the power, the throne. They tell me what they think I want to hear. They perform and posture and pretend. His eyes bored into hers. But you looked at me and saw what? Not a king? A person, Elira whispered. Just a person who seemed sad. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or pain quickly hidden. Sad? Lonely, she amended. Like you were searching for something you'd lost. For a long moment, he didn't speak, then, I've been searching for you my entire life. I just didn't know it until tonight. The sincerity in his voice made her chest ache. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to girls like her. Yet here she stood, the moon painting silver highlights in a king's dark hair, his hands cradling her face like she was something precious. I don't know how to be what you need, she confessed. I'm not like the others. I'm perfect, he interrupted. You're perfect. I'm broken. You're whole. His voice was firm now, commanding. Whatever lies they've told you, whatever poison they've poured in your ears, forget it. I know what you are, Elira Valmer. I can feel it in every fiber of my being. You are strong. You are worthy. And you are mine. The possessiveness in that last word should have frightened her, should have raised every defensive wall she'd built over years of rejection and humiliation. But instead, it made her feel safe, protected, claimed in a way that had nothing to do with ownership and everything to do with belonging. What happens now? She asked. A slow smile curved his lips, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his harsh features into something approaching warmth. Now, he said, we go back inside, and I introduce you to that ballroom full of wolves as exactly what you are. What am I? Mine, he said again. Then softer, my mate, my future queen, the woman who will stand beside me and rule the northern dominions. Queen. The word was so absurd it almost made her laugh. Her, Elira Valmer, the girl no one wanted, the family embarrassment, the defective wolf who couldn't shift. A queen? They'll never accept it, she said. My family, the other nobles, I don't care. The gentleness vanished from his expression, replaced by something hard and dangerous. Let them object. Let them rage and plot and scheme. The bond between mates is sacred and absolute. No law, no custom, no tradition can break it. You are mine by right of fate itself. But do you want this? He cut her off, his eyes searching hers. Tell me true, Alira. Do you want to leave this place? Leave the people who've spent your whole life making you feel worthless? Come with me and see what you might become without their poison in your veins. It was the easiest question anyone had ever asked her. Yes, she breathed. Yes, I want that. Then take my hand, Darius said, offering it to her once more. And let's go show them what happens when a king chooses his mate. She took his hand, and together they walked back toward the ballroom. But they only made it halfway across the garden before her father came storming down the path, his face purple with rage and what might have been fear. Elira! Lord Aldrich's voice cracked like a whip. Get away from His Majesty this instant! You're embarrassing the family! Darius stopped walking. His grip on Alira's hand tightened protectively. Lord Aldrich, he said, his voice cold enough to frost glass, I suggest you choose your next words very carefully. But Lord Aldrich was too angry or too stupid to heed the warning. He grabbed Alira's free arm and tried to yank her away from the king. Forgive her, Your Majesty. My daughter doesn't understand her place. She shouldn't have bothered you. Release her. The command was soft, deadly. Lord Aldrich's hand fell away as if burned. He stared at the king with dawning horror, finally understanding that he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. This woman, Darius said, pulling Alira close against his side, is under my protection. Touch her again, and lose the hand that dares it. Disrespect her again, and lose the tongue that speaks it. Am I understood? Your Majesty, Lord Aldrich stammered, there's been some mistake. Alira is not worthy of your attention. She's defective, broken. She is my mate. The words fell into the garden like stones into still water, sending ripples of consequence in all directions. Lord Aldrich's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, his face cycling through shock, disbelief, and finally, calculating greed. Your mate, he repeated slowly. My daughter is... You're saying that Alira is your fated mate? I don't repeat myself, Lord Aldrich. A smile began spreading across Lord Aldrich's face, a terrible smile full of sharp teeth and sharper ambitions. Of course! Yes, of course she is. I always knew there was something special about Alira. Why, I was just telling the other nobles. You were telling them she was an embarrassment, Alira said quietly. The anger was building in her chest now, hot and righteous. You've spent my entire life telling me I was worthless, broken, a stain on the family name. Now, Lord Aldrich's voice turned oily. You misunderstood, my dear. A father must be hard sometimes, must push his children to be better. You tried to marry me off to anyone who would take me, Alira continued, her voice growing stronger. You told Marcus Greystone's parents I was desperate. You offered them money to take me off your hands. Lord Aldrich's smile faltered. Alira, you're being dramatic. You told me I should disappear, she said. That the kindest thing I could do was stop existing. I never... You did. The voice came from behind Lord Aldrich, and everyone turned to find Cylindra standing at the edge of the garden, her emerald gown glowing in the moonlight. But there was no triumph in her expression now, only calculation. Father said those exact words last month. I was there. She walked forward, her movements graceful despite the tension crackling through the air. When she reached them, she curtsied deeply to Darius, a perfect courtier's bow that managed to display her cleavage while maintaining plausible deniability. Your Majesty, she purred, what a delightful surprise. Though I must confess, I'm confused. Surely there's been some mistake about dear Alira being your mate. She's not even a full wolf, you see. Her mother was human. The revelation hung in the air like a blade. Alira felt the blood drain from her face. This was it, the secret her family had guarded for years, the truth that explained everything, her inability to shift, her status as an outsider. The reason even common wolves wouldn't have her. She was half-blood, an abomination in a society that prized pure wolf lineage above all else. Is this true? Darius asked, his voice carefully neutral. Alira couldn't speak. She could only nod, waiting for the inevitable rejection, for him to realize his mistake, to understand that fate couldn't possibly have bound him to someone so fundamentally flawed. Good, Darius said. Everyone froze. Good? Cylindra repeated incredulously. Your Majesty, perhaps you don't understand. She's half human. Tainted blood. She can't even shift. She's completely unsuitable to be— Let me make something very clear, Darius interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. The air around him seemed to shimmer as his power rose to the surface. I don't give a damn about bloodlines. I don't care if she's half human, quarter human, or no human at all. The mate bond recognizes souls, not genealogy. My wolf chose hers. That makes her more suitable to be my queen than every pure-blood noble in this entire kingdom combined. Cylindra's face went white, then red. But the traditions can burn, Darius said flatly. I am the Alpha King. I make the traditions. And I say that Elira Valmare is my mate, my chosen queen, and anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with my wolf. The threat was unmistakable. Cylindra stumbled back, her confidence crumbling. Lord Aldrich looked like he might be sick, his dreams of social climbing through Cylindra evaporating in the face of this new reality. Now, Darius continued, turning back toward the ballroom, shall we make this official? I believe there's a room full of nobles who need to understand how things stand. They walked back into the ballroom as a group, Darius and Elira in the lead, Lord Aldrich and Cylindra trailing behind like prisoners being led to execution. Word of what had happened in the garden had already spread somehow. The entire assembly stood waiting, arranged in a loose circle, their faces painted with everything from shock to horror to barely concealed glee at the scandal. Darius led Elira to the center of the floor, then turned to address the crowd. I came here tonight seeking my mate, he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast room. I have found her. Elira Valmare is mine by right of the sacred bond. She will be my queen, and you will show her the respect that position demands. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Elira could feel the stares, could sense the judgment and disbelief. But Darius's hand was warm in hers, his presence beside her like a wall against the storm. Then he did something that made the entire room gasp. He knelt before her. The Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in the northern dominions, knelt at her feet and looked up into her eyes. Elira Valmare, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, I offer you my heart, my throne, and my protection. I ask you to be my mate, my queen, my partner in all things. Not because you have to, not because of duty or tradition or obligation, but because you choose it, because you choose me. Tears were streaming down Elira's face now, though she couldn't say when they'd started. Every eye in the ballroom was on her, every ear straining to hear her response. This was the moment, the choice that would define the rest of her life. She could say no, could refuse the king and go back to her quiet, invisible existence, could spare herself the scrutiny, the pressure, the impossible weight of a crown. Or she could say yes, could step into the unknown with this fierce, lonely man who'd crossed a crowded ballroom for the girl nobody wanted. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes, Darius Thorne, I choose you. He rose in one fluid motion and pulled her into his arms. The kiss he gave her was not gentle or tentative. It was claiming, possessive, absolute. A declaration to every wolf in that room that she was his and he was hers, and nothing in heaven or earth would change that. The bond between them flared to life, no longer just a thread but a blazing rope of light and power connecting their souls. Elira gasped into his mouth as she felt it, felt him, settling into the deepest parts of her being, filling spaces she hadn't known were empty. When they finally broke apart, the ballroom was dead silent. Then slowly, one by one, the nobles began to bow. They had no choice. The Alpha King had made his choice, and the bond was undeniable. To reject it would be to reject the fundamental laws that governed their world. Even Cylindra bowed, though her face was twisted with hate. Even Lord Aldrich, though he looked like he was choking on glass. Only Elira remained standing tall, her hand clasped in Darius's, her borrowed gray gown suddenly looking less like a mark of shame and more like a statement of defiance. She had been the girl no one wanted. Now she was the woman a king chose, and everything was about to change. The journey north began at dawn. Elira stood in the courtyard of House Valmare, watching servants load trunks and supplies onto carriages bearing the royal crest. a silver wolf against a field of midnight blue. The morning air was crisp and cold, carrying the scent of pine from the distant mountains that marked the border of the northern dominions. She'd barely slept, her mind spinning with everything that had happened in the space of a single night. She was leaving. Actually leaving the only home she'd ever known, riding away with a man she'd met mere hours ago to become queen of a kingdom she'd never seen. It was madness. It was freedom. Having second thoughts, Darius appeared beside her, moving with that unnatural silence that marked him as something more than human. He wore traveling clothes now, dark leather and fur that made him look every inch the northern warrior king. His eyes, still glowing faintly in the early light, studied her with an intensity that made her stomach flutter. "No," Alara said honestly. "Should I be?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Most would be. You're leaving everything familiar for an uncertain future with a stranger." "You're not a stranger," she said. The words felt true, even if she couldn't quite explain why. The bond between them hummed constantly now, a warm presence at the edge of her awareness. She could feel his emotions like shadows, concern, protectiveness, and underneath it all, a fierce possessiveness that should have frightened her, but instead made her feel cherished. And nothing about my old life was worth keeping. Your family didn't come to see you off. It wasn't a question. They both knew Lord Aldrich and Cylindra had retreated to their chambers after the ball, too humiliated to face the consequences of their cruelty. The other nobles had whispered and speculated until the early hours, dissecting every detail of the night's scandal. "Good," Elira said firmly. "I have nothing to say to them." Darius reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture surprisingly gentle from such a fearsome man. "You're stronger than you know." Before she could respond, a commotion erupted at the courtyard gates. Voices raised in argument, the clatter of hooves on stone. Elira turned to see a group of riders forcing their way past the guards. 5 men in the colors of different noble houses, their faces set with grim determination. "Your Majesty!" The leader dismounted swiftly, a barrel-chested man with iron-gray hair that Elira recognized as Lord Cassian of House Ironwood. "We must speak with you before you depart." Darius's expression went cold and flat. "Make it quick." Lord Cassian glanced at Elira, then back to the king. "Perhaps this conversation would be better held in private. Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of my mate." The words were clipped, dangerous. "Speak or get out of my way." The nobleman's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Very well. We've come to formally protest your choice of queen. We represent 12 of the most powerful houses in the northern dominions, and we are united in our concern." "Concern," Darius repeated flatly. "About what exactly?" "About placing a half-blood on the throne." Lord Cassian's voice was blunt, matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing crop yields rather than Elira's worth as a person. "We understand the mate bond is sacred, Your Majesty, but there are ways to honor it without granting her a crown. Take her as a consort. Give her a place at court. But the queen must be pure-blooded, from established lineage." "No." The word cracked through the courtyard like a whip. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees as Darius's power rolled off him in waves. Several of the visiting nobles' horses shied nervously, sensing the predator among them. "I wasn't asking permission," Darius continued, his voice soft and deadly. "I was informing you of reality. Elira Valmere is my mate. She will be my queen. Those facts are not negotiable." "But Your Majesty," another noble spoke up, Lord Brennan of House Stormclaw, his weathered face etched with worry. "Think of the precedent this sets. If a half-blood can wear the crown, what message does that send to—" "It sends the message that I care about the bond between souls more than I care about who your grandparents were," Darius interrupted. "Is that a problem for you, Brennan?" The old lord had the grace to look uncomfortable. "It's not about her personally, Your Majesty. I'm sure she's a lovely girl. But the stability of the kingdom depends on tradition, on the old ways." "The old ways?" Darius laughed, and there was nothing kind in the sound. "Let me tell you about the old ways, Brennan. The old ways say that when an alpha king claims his mate, no law of man or wolf can supersede that bond. The old ways say that challenging a king's mate is challenging the king himself. So if you gentlemen are here to challenge me—" He let the sentence hang, his eyes glowing brighter now, his wolf pressing close to the surface. The nobles exchanged glances, and Elira could see the calculation in their eyes. They'd come prepared to pressure him, perhaps even threaten to withdraw their support. But none of them were prepared to actually fight him. Everyone knew how that would end. "We're not challenging you, Your Majesty," Lord Cassian said carefully. "We're simply asking you to consider the difficulties ahead. The other houses won't accept her easily. There will be resistance, possibly even rebellion. Then let them rebel." Darius's voice was hard as iron. "And let them learn what happens to traitors. Your Majesty, this conversation is over." Darius turned away dismissively, taking Elira's arm. "Unless any of you would like to continue it with steel instead of words." Silence. "I thought not." He guided Elira toward the waiting carriage. "We leave within the hour. I suggest you gentlemen ride ahead and spread the word. The northern dominions have a new queen, and she will be treated with the respect her position demands. Anyone who has a problem with that can bring it to me personally." The nobles knew a dismissal when they heard one. They mounted their horses and rode out, their faces grim. But Elira could feel their anger and resentment like poison in the air. "They hate me," she said quietly, once they were alone, "and I haven't even reached your kingdom yet." "They fear change," Darius corrected. "They've built their power on bloodlines and tradition. You represent something they can't control, proof that merit matters more than ancestry. Of course they hate you. That's how you know you're dangerous to them." "I'm not dangerous to anyone." He turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to frame her face. "You're dangerous to every small-minded noble who's ever used their lineage as an excuse for mediocrity. You're dangerous to every corrupt lord who thought their blood made them untouchable. You're dangerous to everyone who profits from keeping people like you down." His thumbs traced her cheekbones. "You're the most dangerous thing that's happened to the old order in a century, and I'm going to help you burn it all down." The fierce promise in his voice sent shivers down her spine. This was why they feared him, she realized. Not just his power, but his willingness to use it to reshape the world according to his own vision. "What if I'm not strong enough?" she whispered. "What if I fail you?" "You won't." His certainty was absolute. "But even if you stumbled, I'd catch you. That's what mates do." The journey north took 5 days of hard riding. They traveled with an escort of 20 royal guards, elite soldiers handpicked by Darius himself. The route took them through rolling farmland that gradually gave way to darker forests and rocky hills as they climbed toward the mountains that cradled the northern dominions. Elira had never been beyond House Valmir's borders before. Everything was new and strange and occasionally terrifying. The forests here were older, wilder, full of shadows that moved in ways that had nothing to do with wind. At night, she could hear things howling in the darkness. Not ordinary wolves, but something else, something that made her human blood run cold. But Darius was always there. He rode beside her during the day, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the kingdom she would help rule. At night, he made sure she had the warmest furs, the best food, the safest position near the fire. He never pushed her, never demanded more than she was ready to give, but his presence was constant and comforting. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. She was learning to read his moods through it, the flash of irritation when one of the guards was slow to respond, the quiet pleasure when she laughed at one of his dry observations, the constant undercurrent of protectiveness that colored everything he felt toward her. On the third night, camped in a clearing beneath ancient pines, Elira finally worked up the courage to ask the question that had been gnawing at her. "Why haven't you shifted in front of me?" Darius looked up from the map he'd been studying, firelight playing across his sharp features. "What makes you think I haven't?" "The guards shift regularly when they patrol the perimeter. I've seen their wolf forms. They're beautiful and powerful, but you never do. Why?" He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames. "Because my wolf is not beautiful," he said finally. "It's a monster, a killing machine built for war and dominance. The first time you see it, I want you to be ready." "I'm ready now." "No," he said gently. "You're not. Trust me on this." There was pain in his voice, old and deep, and Elira suddenly understood. He was afraid. The Alpha King, who feared nothing and no one, was afraid of frightening her away. She moved to sit beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I've been called a monster my entire life," she said softly, "because I couldn't shift. because I was half-blood, because I didn't fit into their perfect little boxes. So whatever you are, whatever form you take, I'm not afraid of monsters. I am one, remember? His hand found hers in the darkness. You're not a monster, Illyra. Neither are you. He didn't argue, but she could feel his doubt through the bond. Whatever his wolf was, whatever he became when he shifted, it carried a weight of shame and fear that matched her own. They reached the border of the northern dominions at midday on the 5th day. The change was immediate and dramatic. The rolling hills gave way to sharp mountain peaks that clawed at the sky. The air grew thinner, colder, scented with snow even in the heart of summer. And everywhere Illyra looked, she saw wolves. They lined the ridges and cliff tops, dozens of them, their fur every shade from white to black. They watched the procession with glowing eyes, silent and eerily still. She'd never seen so many in one place. They're here to see you, Darius explained, following her gaze. Word travels fast in the dominions. Every pack within 100 miles knows their king has claimed a mate. What do they think of me? They're curious, cautious, but they'll accept you because I do. The wolves understand the bond better than the nobles. It's instinctive for them. As if in response to his words, a massive gray wolf detached itself from the ridge and loped down toward them. It was easily twice the size of any wolf Illyra had ever seen, with scars crisscrossing its muzzle and a calculating intelligence in its amber eyes. The wolf stopped 20 feet away and shifted. The transformation was breathtaking. One moment there was a wolf, the next a tall woman with silver hair and the same amber eyes. She wore simple leather clothes that had somehow survived the shift, and her face was weathered by wind and time. Your Majesty. She bowed to Darius, then turned her attention to Illyra. So this is the half-blood everyone's talking about. Her name is Illyra, Darius said, his voice carrying a warning, and she's your queen. The woman's eyes narrowed, studying Illyra with the same intensity she'd used to evaluate prey. Can she even shift? That's none of your concern, Kara. It's everyone's concern if we're expected to follow her. Kara moved closer, circling Illyra like a predator. The wolves need a strong alpha female. Someone who can hunt, fight, lead. What can she do besides look pretty in a borrowed dress? The insult stung, but Illyra kept her expression neutral. She could feel Darius tensing beside her, his anger building, but she placed a hand on his arm. I don't know what I can do yet, Illyra said, meeting Kara's challenging stare directly. I've spent my whole life being told what I can't do, but I'm willing to learn, and I'm a lot harder to break than I look. Something shifted in Kara's expression, not quite approval, but perhaps a glimmer of respect. We'll see. She shifted back into wolf form and loped away, disappearing into the trees. Don't mind Kara, Shed, Darius said. She's the alpha of the mountain pack. She's been trying to challenge my authority for years. By insulting your mate? By testing your strength. In wolf culture, respect is earned through action, not bloodline. She wants to see if you'll fold under pressure or stand your ground. And what did she learn? He smiled, and it was fierce and proud. That you're stronger than you look. The capital city of Thornhaven appeared at sunset, sprawling across a valley between two mountain ranges. It was nothing like the elegant estates of the southern territories. Here, everything was built for function and defense. Thick stone walls, narrow windows, fortified gates. The buildings climbed the mountainside in terraced levels, connected by steep stone stairs and bridges that seemed to defy gravity. At the highest point, dominating the entire city, stood the royal fortress. It was carved directly into the mountain itself, more cave system than castle, with towers that looked like they'd grown from the living rock. Illyra could see why the northern dominions had never been conquered. This place was impregnable, a stronghold that could withstand any siege. The gates opened as they approached, and the procession rode through streets lined with watching wolves, both human and animal form. The crowd was silent, their faces neutral, but Illyra could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on her. The whispers started as soon as they passed. That's her? She's so small. I heard she can't shift at all. Half-blood trash. What was the king thinking? She won't last a month. The court will eat her alive. Illyra kept her spine straight and her eyes forward, refusing to show how much the words hurt. Darius rode beside her, his presence a shield against the worst of the hostility. but even he couldn't protect her from everything. The fortress was even more imposing up close. They dismounted in a massive courtyard where guards in silver armor stood at attention. A woman in flowing blue robes waited at the top of the stairs, elderly, with white hair braided in complex patterns and eyes that seemed to see straight through to Alira's soul. "Your Majesty," the woman said, bowing deeply. "Welcome home, and welcome to your guest." "She's not a guest, Morella." Darius's voice was sharp. "She's my mate and your future queen. Prepare the queen's chambers and inform the court that there will be a formal presentation ceremony tomorrow night." Morella's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "As you command, Your Majesty, though I feel obligated to mention that the Council has requested an emergency session to discuss certain concerns." "Let me guess. Concerns about Alira's bloodline?" "Among other things." Morella's gaze slid to Alira, assessing and finding her wanting. "The people need assurance that their future queen is capable of bearing strong heirs, that she won't weaken the royal line with human blood." Alira felt her cheeks burning. They were talking about her like she was livestock being evaluated for breeding. "The people," Darius said coldly, "will accept what I tell them to accept. And if the council has concerns, they can bring them to me directly instead of sending messages through my chamberlain." "Of course, Your Majesty." Morella bowed again, but the gesture felt mocking. "I'll have servants show your guests to temporary quarters until the Queen's chambers are ready." "She stays with me," Darius interrupted, "tonight and every night hereafter." Morella's eyebrows rose. "That's highly irregular, Your Majesty. The Council will— I don't care what the Council thinks." He took Alira's hand and pulled her close. "She's mine. She sleeps where I sleep, eats where I eat, goes where I go. Is that clear enough, or do I need to draw you a diagram?" "Crystal clear, Your Majesty." Morella's smile was thin and sharp. "I'll make the arrangements." She swept away, her robes billowing behind her like storm clouds. Alira watched her go, her stomach tight with anxiety. "She hates me," she said quietly. "She hates everyone," Darius corrected. "Morella's been trying to control the court since my father's time. She sees you as a threat to her influence." "Because I'm weak? Because you're mine, and she can't manipulate you the way she's manipulated every other person who's gotten close to me." He squeezed her hand. "Come on, let me show you your new home." The royal chambers were as austere as the rest of the fortress. Heavy stone walls, narrow windows, furniture built for durability rather than comfort. But there was a kind of stark beauty to it. Furs and tapestries in rich colors, a fireplace large enough to stand in, a balcony that overlooked the entire valley. "It's not as soft as what you're used to," Darius said, watching her explore. "It's perfect," Alira said honestly. "It feels real, solid, like it won't disappear if I blink." That night she lay in Darius's bed, their bed now, listening to the wind howl through the mountains. He held her close, his body warm and solid against her back, one arm wrapped protectively around her waist. "Tomorrow will be difficult," he murmured into her hair. "The court will challenge you, test you, try to make you break." "I know. If it becomes too much, I won't run," she said firmly. "I didn't come this far to give up at the first sign of trouble." She felt him smile against her neck. "That's my queen." But sleep was a long time coming, and when it finally arrived, it brought nightmares of a court full of hostile faces, all demanding to know what right a half-blood mongrel had to wear a crown. The formal presentation ceremony was held in the Great Hall, a cavernous space carved from the heart of the mountain. Every noble house in the northern dominions had sent representatives, hundreds of wolves packed into the tiered seating that rose like an amphitheater around the central floor. Alira stood beside Darius's throne, wearing a gown that Morella had selected, midnight blue silk with silver embroidery. It was beautiful, but clearly chosen to emphasize her unsuitability. The northern ladies wore practical leathers and furs. She looked like a southern decoration. The ceremony began with Darius formally announcing their bond to the assembled court. There was polite applause, but Alira could feel the undercurrent of resentment and hostility. These wolves hadn't accepted her. They were simply too afraid of their king to openly rebel. Then came the challenges. "Your Majesty," Lord Cassian rose from his seat, his voice carrying across the hall. "With respect, The court requests proof that this woman is truly your fated mate. The bond is sacred, yes, but it must be verified before we can accept her as queen." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Darius's hand tightened on the arm of his throne. "You doubt my word?" His voice was dangerously soft. "We doubt nothing, your majesty, but tradition demands verification. Let her shift before the court. Let us see her wolf and judge the strength of the bond for ourselves." The trap was elegant. If she shifted and her wolf was weak or malformed, they could argue she was unfit. If she couldn't shift at all, which they clearly suspected, they could use it as grounds to reject her entirely. Alira felt panic rising in her throat. She couldn't shift. She'd never been able to. This was exactly what they wanted: public humiliation, proof of her inadequacy. "The bond needs no verification," Darius said coldly. "I've claimed her. That's enough." "But your majesty—" "Enough." The word echoed through the hall like thunder. Darius rose from his throne, power rolling off him in waves. "I am your king. My word is law. Alira Valmer is my mate, and she will be your queen. Any wolf who has a problem with that can challenge me directly." The temperature in the hall dropped. Challenging an alpha king meant a fight to the death. No one was that desperate. But then a new voice spoke up, young, female, dripping with false sweetness. "Perhaps a different kind of proof, your majesty?" Alira turned to see a beautiful woman rising from the front row. She had midnight black hair and eyes like green ice, and she moved with the lethal grace of a born predator. Her gown was northern style, black leather and silver chains that emphasized her dangerous beauty. "Lady Seraphine," Darius said, his tone wary. "What are you suggesting?" Seraphine smiled, and it was all teeth. "Let your mate prove herself through the traditional trials. 3 tests of strength, wisdom, and will. If she passes, the court will accept her. If she fails—" The smile widened. "Well, then we'll know she's not fit to stand beside you." The crowd erupted in excited murmurs. This was better than they'd hoped for. Entertainment and potential humiliation all in one package. "No," Darius said flatly. "The trials are meant for wolves competing for alpha status, not for testing my mate." "I'll do it." Alira's voice cut through the noise. Every head turned toward her. She could feel Darius's shock and anger through the bond, but she ignored it. This was her fight. "I'll take the trials," she repeated, stepping forward. "If that's what it takes to prove I'm worthy of standing beside my mate, then I'll do it." The hall erupted in chaos, some cheering, others protesting, everyone talking at once. But Alira kept her eyes on Seraphine, who was studying her with new interest. "Bold," Seraphine purred. "I like that. Very well, half-blood. The trials begin at dawn. I do hope you survive them." The threat was clear. These wouldn't be symbolic tests. They would be designed to break her, possibly even kill her. And there was nothing Darius could do to stop it without appearing to doubt her strength. She'd just volunteered to face 3 trials designed for full-blooded wolves, tests that would push her to her absolute limits. And everyone in that hall knew she couldn't shift. The moment the words left her mouth, Alira knew she'd made a terrible mistake. But it was too late to take them back. The court had heard. Seraphine's smile had turned victorious. And Darius, she could feel his fury and fear through the bond like a wildfire burning out of control. The hall finally quieted as Darius raised his hand. His face was a mask of control, but his eyes blazed with barely contained rage. "The trials will proceed at dawn," he announced, his voice deadly calm. "But understand this. Any wolf who harms my mate beyond what is necessary will answer to me personally. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear, Your Majesty," Seraphine said, her tone dripping with false deference. "We would never dream of permanently damaging your precious half-blood. The trials are simply meant to test her worthiness, after all." The emphasis on half-blood sent ripples of laughter through the crowd. Alira felt her cheeks burning, but kept her expression neutral. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. As the court dispersed, nobles clustered in groups, already placing bets on how quickly she would fail. Alira caught fragments of conversation as she passed. 3 trials? She won't survive the first one. I give her 10 minutes before she's begging the king to call it off. This is going to be entertaining. I haven't seen a proper execution in years. Darius's hand found hers, his grip almost painful in its intensity. He led her from the hall in silence, His jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. They made it to their chambers before he exploded. "What were you thinking?" He whirled on her, his eyes blazing amber. "Do you have any idea what you've just agreed to? Those trials are designed to break full-blooded wolves. They're brutal, dangerous. Wolves have died attempting them." "I had to do something," Elira shot back, her own anger rising to meet his. "They were never going to accept me based on your word alone. You saw them. They need proof. I'm not just some weak human you're keeping as a pet." "So you volunteer for a death sentence instead?" His hands gripped her shoulders, not rough, but desperate. "Elira, you can't shift. How are you supposed to pass trials designed for wolves?" "I don't know." The admission burst from her like a confession. "But what choice did I have? Let them strip me of the title before I ever wore the crown. Watch them force you to choose between me and your kingdom." "I would choose you," he said fiercely, "every single time. Kingdom be damned." "And that's exactly why I can't let it come to that." She cupped his face in her hands, feeling the tension in his jaw. "You've spent years building this kingdom, maintaining the peace between the packs. I won't be the weakness that tears it all down. If passing these trials is what it takes to prove I belong beside you, then I'll find a way." "You can't shift," he repeated, quieter now, but no less anguished. "Then I'll pass them without shifting." "That's impossible." "Maybe." She pulled him close, resting her forehead against his. "But I've been called impossible my whole life. Might as well live up to the name." He wrapped his arms around her, holding her like she might disappear. Through the bond, she could feel his emotions churning. Fear, pride, fury, helplessness. The Alpha King, who could command armies and bend kingdoms to his will, was powerless to protect his mate from this. "Tell me about the trials," Elira said quietly. "If I'm going to face them, I need to know what's coming." Darius was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed and led her to the balcony, where the mountain wind whipped around them like invisible wolves. "The first trial is strength," he began, his voice hollow. "The challenger must face a combat trial, usually against multiple opponents or a single powerful adversary. It tests your ability to protect yourself and others." "I can fight," Elira said, though her voice lacked conviction. She'd had basic self-defense training, but nothing that would prepare her for combat against trained wolf warriors. "The second trial is wisdom," Darius continued. "It varies depending on who designs it, but it always involves solving an impossible problem under pressure, making a choice where every option leads to loss." "And the third?" His expression darkened. "The trial of will. The challenger must face their deepest fear, their greatest weakness, and overcome it. It breaks most people, even strong wolves." Elira absorbed this, her stomach twisting into knots. 3 trials, each designed to prove she was worthy of standing beside a king. Each designed for wolves who could shift, who had lifetimes of training and instinct to draw upon. She had none of that. "There's something else," Darius said reluctantly. "Seraphine will be the trial master. She gets to design each test, set the parameters, judge your success or failure. She hates me. She wants me." His voice was flat. "She's been trying to position herself as my mate for years. Your arrival destroyed her plans. She'll make these trials as brutal as she can without technically breaking the rules. Then I'll just have to survive whatever she throws at me." Darius turned to her, his eyes searching hers. "Why are you doing this? Really? You could walk away right now. I would take you anywhere you wanted to go, keep you safe." "I don't want safe," Elira interrupted. "I've been safe my whole life. Safe and invisible and worthless. You offered me a chance to be something more, to matter. I'm not going to throw that away just because it's hard." He kissed her then, fierce and desperate, pouring everything he couldn't say into the connection between their lips. When they finally broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. "If anything happens to you," he whispered, "I will burn this kingdom to ash and scatter it to the winds." "Nothing's going to happen to me," she promised, praying it was true. Dawn came too quickly. Elira stood in the center of the great hall, which had been cleared of furniture and transformed into an arena. The floor had been marked with chalk symbols, ancient wolf runes that glowed faintly in the pre-dawn darkness. Tiered seating surrounded the space, already packed with nobles eager to witness her humiliation. She wore simple leather pants and a tunic that Morella had provided, along with soft boots that would allow for movement. No armor, no weapons, just her and whatever strength she could summon. Darius sat on his throne at the head of the hall, his face carved from stone. But through the bond she could feel him, a constant presence at the edge of her awareness, offering silent support even though he couldn't intervene. Seraphine entered from the opposite side, dressed in black leather that hugged her curves like a second skin. She moved with predatory grace, her smile sharp and cruel. "Are you ready, half-blood?" she called out, her voice carrying across the silent hall. "I'm ready." "Excellent." Seraphine clapped her hands, and 4 wolves stepped out from the shadows. Not human wolves, actual wolves in their animal forms. Each was massive, easily 3 times the size of a normal wolf, with eyes that glowed yellow in the darkness. "The first trial is strength," Seraphine announced. "You must survive against these 4 warriors for 10 minutes. If you fall unconscious or surrender, you fail. If you survive, you pass. Simple enough even for human understanding. Yes?" Elira's heart hammered against her ribs. 10 minutes against 4 trained fighters. In wolf form, they would be faster, stronger, more lethal than she could ever hope to match. "Begin!" Seraphine's command cracked through the air. The wolves charged. Elira dove to the side, barely avoiding the first snapping jaws. Claws raked across her shoulder, drawing blood. She rolled, came up running, her mind racing. She couldn't outfight them, couldn't outrun them. She had to think. The second wolf lunged for her throat. Elira grabbed one of the chalk markers from the floor and threw it directly into the wolf's eyes. The creature yelped and stumbled, blinded temporarily. She used the moment to sprint toward the edge of the arena, where the tiered seating began. The wolves followed, working together with practiced precision. They were herding her, cutting off escape routes, preparing for the kill. But Elira wasn't trying to escape. She grabbed one of the burning torches from its wall sconce and spun to face them. The wolves pulled up short, wary of fire. It was instinctive. Even the most powerful wolf respected flame. "Clever?" Seraphine called out. "But not clever enough." The third wolf circled wide, coming at her from the side where the torch couldn't reach. Elira swung the flame in a wide arc, forcing it back, but she knew she was running out of time. Her shoulder was bleeding badly, and her arms were already trembling from the weight of the torch. Then she noticed something. The chalk symbols on the floor, they were glowing brighter when the wolves crossed them, some kind of ward or boundary marker. And they formed a pattern, a geometric design that looked almost like a trap. Someone had designed this arena with specific pathways, specific zones of power. If she could just figure out the pattern, use it to her advantage. The fourth wolf attacked from behind, slamming into her back with enough force to knock the air from her lungs. She went down hard, the torch rolling away. Teeth closed around her calf, piercing through leather and skin. She screamed, kicking desperately with her free leg. The crowd roared with excitement. They could smell blood now. The end was near. But Elira's mind was still working, still analyzing. The wolf that had bitten her was standing directly on one of the chalk symbols, and when it growled, she could see its form flickering slightly, as if the ward was interfering with its stability. It was weakening them. Not much, but enough. She stopped fighting, let her body go limp. The wolf holding her leg hesitated, confused by the sudden surrender. That moment of hesitation was all she needed. Elira twisted, grabbed a handful of chalk dust from the broken marker nearby, and threw it directly into the wolf's face. As it recoiled, she rolled toward the center of the arena where 3 wards intersected. The wolves followed, converging on her position. But the moment they crossed into that central intersection, their forms flickered more violently. The power in the wards was disrupting their shifted state, making it harder for them to maintain wolf form. "Now!" Elira shouted, though she didn't know why. And then something impossible happened. Heat exploded through her chest, the bond with Darius surging with sudden, overwhelming power. She felt his wolf rising inside him, felt his desperate need to protect her, to save her. That power flooded through their connection like a river breaking through a dam, and her own wolf, buried so deep she'd thought it didn't exist, answered. The shift tore through her like lightning. One moment she was human, broken and bleeding. The next, she was something else entirely. Her body reformed itself in a cascade of silver light and burning pain. Bones cracked and elongated. Muscles tore and rebuilt themselves stronger. Her senses exploded outward. Suddenly, she could smell everything, hear everything, feel the vibrations of movement through the stone floor. When the light faded, Elira stood on 4 legs instead of 2. The great hall erupted into chaos, because the wolf standing in the center of the arena wasn't small or weak or malformed. She was magnificent, silver-white fur that seemed to glow with inner light, lean and compact but radiating power, eyes that burned amber gold, the same color as Darius's. And most shocking of all, ancient runes visible beneath her fur, spiraling across her body in patterns that no wolf had displayed in living memory. The 4 attacking wolves stumbled back, suddenly uncertain, because what stood before them wasn't a half-blood mongrel. It was something far older, far more dangerous. Seraphine's face had gone chalk white. "That's impossible," she whispered. "The bloodline was extinct. There are no more—" But Elira wasn't listening. The wolf's instincts had taken over, and they were singing a song of survival and fury. She lunged forward, moving faster than she'd ever moved in human form. Her jaws closed around the first wolf's throat, not to kill, but to dominate, to force submission. The wolf yelped and rolled onto its back, baring its belly in surrender. The second wolf charged. Elira met it head-on, their bodies colliding with a sound like thunder. They rolled across the floor, snapping and snarling, but Elira fought with a ferocity born of years of repressed rage and humiliation. Every insult, every mockery, every moment of pain, it all poured into her movements. She won. The second wolf limped away, defeated. The third and fourth wolves exchanged glances, then lowered their heads in submission. They wouldn't fight. Not against this. Silence fell across the hall. Elira shifted back to human form, the transformation easier this time, almost natural. She stood naked in the center of the arena, her body covered in blood and chalk dust, her chest heaving with exertion. But she was standing, victorious. "The first trial is complete," Darius's voice rang out, filled with barely suppressed triumph. "My mate has proven her strength." The court could only stare, shock and fear written across every face, because they'd just witnessed something they'd thought impossible, a half-blood shifting into a form that suggested power beyond anything they'd imagined. Seraphine recovered first, though her voice shook slightly. The second trial will commence this evening, the trial of wisdom. Let's see if the mongrel's luck holds." But there was no confidence in her words now, only desperation, because the game had changed. Elira wasn't the weak victim they'd expected to break. She was something else entirely, something dangerous. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Darius had her taken to the healing chambers where a silent, grim-faced healer tended to her wounds. The bites on her shoulder and calf required stitches, and she had bruises blooming across her ribs from where she'd been slammed to the ground. But none of that mattered compared to what had happened. She'd shifted. After 22 years of being told she was broken, defective, less than, she'd proven them all wrong in the most spectacular way possible. Darius arrived as the healer was finishing. He dismissed the woman with a curt nod and closed the door behind her, sealing them in privacy. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it. "Tell you what?" "That you carried moonborn blood." Elira stared at him. "I don't know what that means." "The runes on your wolf form, the silver coloring, the way the wards reacted to you." He moved closer, his eyes intense. "Elira, the moonborn were an ancient bloodline, supposedly blessed by the first wolves. They could do things other wolves couldn't, manipulate pack bonds, communicate across vast distances, even influence the shifting of others." "That's impossible. My mother was human." "Was she?" Darius interrupted. "Are you certain? Because what I just witnessed wasn't a half-blood transformation. It was pure moonborn, and that bloodline was supposed to have died out 300 years ago." Elira's mind was reeling. Her mother had died when she was 3 years old. She had only vague memories, kind eyes, gentle hands, a lullaby sung in a language she didn't recognize. Lord Aldrich had told her that her mother was a human servant he'd taken as a mistress, that the shame of his bastard half-blood daughter had driven her to suicide. But what if that was a lie? "My father told me—" "Your father is a politician and a coward," Darius said bluntly. "He'd lie about anything if it served his interests. Elira, think about it. If you carry moonborn blood, if people knew what you really were, the power you might possess. It would make you incredibly valuable, or incredibly dangerous. So he told everyone I was half human to hide what I really am? It's possible. Maybe he didn't even know himself. Maybe your mother hid it from him. Darius cupped her face in his hands. But this changes everything. The court can't dismiss you as a weak half-blood anymore. They've seen what you can become. There was a knock at the door. Mirella entered without waiting for permission, her face pinched with barely concealed disgust. Your Majesty, Lady Seraphine has announced the parameters for the second trial. It will take place in 1 hour in the council chamber. What's the trial? Darius demanded. Mirella's smile was cold. A test of wisdom and judgment. The challenger must solve an impossible dilemma, make a choice that proves she has the wisdom to rule. She turned to Elira. I do hope you're clever enough, dear. This trial doesn't test strength, it tests the soul. She swept out, leaving Elira with a growing sense of dread. An hour later, Elira stood in the council chamber, a smaller, more intimate space carved into the mountain's heart. The nobles were packed in tight, their faces eager and cruel. They'd been shocked by her shift, yes, but they still wanted to see her fail. Seraphine stood at the center of the room beside a strange contraption, a wooden frame holding 2 cages. Each cage contained a person. On the left was a young girl, perhaps 8 years old, with tangled blonde hair and terrified blue eyes. She wore the simple clothes of a servant or commoner. On the right was an elderly man, gray-bearded and dignified despite his imprisonment. He wore the colors of House Stormclaw, Lord Brennan's family crest visible on his tunic. The second trial, Seraphine announced, her voice carrying across the silent chamber, tests your wisdom and judgment, your ability to make impossible choices for the good of the kingdom. She gestured to the cages. On your left, a child, innocent, blameless, with her whole life ahead of her. On your right, Lord Brennan's eldest son, a man of importance, education, and noble blood. A man who could serve this kingdom for decades to come. Elira's stomach clenched. She could see where this was going. Both cages are rigged, Seraphine continued, pulling a lever. Above each cage, a massive blade descended, stopping just inches above each prisoner's head. In exactly 5 minutes, both blades will fall. You can save only one. Choose the child, and you condemn a valuable nobleman. Choose the nobleman, and you murder an innocent child. This is insane, Elira breathed. This is ruling, Seraphine countered. Every day a queen must make impossible choices, sacrifice the few for the many, choose between competing goods. Get it wrong, and people die. So choose half-blood. Show us your wisdom. The crowd leaned forward, eager to see how she would fail, because there was no right answer. Choose the child, and the nobles would call her soft, emotional, unfit to make hard decisions. Choose the nobleman, and she'd be a monster who valued rank over innocence. Either way, she lost. Elira looked at both prisoners. The child was crying silently, her small hands gripping the bars. The nobleman watched her with calculating eyes, as if already judging whether she would save him. 4 minutes, Seraphine announced. Elira's mind raced. There had to be a way out, some solution she wasn't seeing. Then she noticed something. The mechanism controlling the blades was complex, yes, but it all converged on a single fulcrum point, a central pivot that controlled both blades simultaneously. The trial was rigged, designed to be impossible, but what if she refused to play by their rules? 3 minutes. Elira walked calmly to the mechanism, ignoring Seraphine's surprised expression. She examined it closely, following the chains and gears with her eyes. What are you doing? Seraphine demanded. You have to choose. No, Elira said quietly. I don't. Before anyone could stop her, she grabbed the central chain and pulled with all her strength. The mechanism groaned, fighting her, but she'd shifted once today already. Her body was stronger than it had been this morning, still humming with residual power from the transformation. The chain snapped. Both blades froze in place, their descent halted by the broken mechanism. The chamber erupted into chaos. She cheated, someone shouted. The trial is invalid. She was supposed to choose. But Darius was laughing, a deep, genuine sound that cut through the noise. He rose from his seat, his eyes blazing with pride and triumph. She did choose, he announced. She chose to save both, to refuse the false dilemma you presented. That's not cheating, that's wisdom. But, Your Majesty, Seraphine began. A wise ruler, Darius continued, his voice carrying absolute authority, knows when to follow the rules and when to break them, when to accept limitations and when to shatter them. My mate just proved she understands that principle better than anyone in this room. He looked at the assembled nobles with cold satisfaction. The second trial is complete. Elira has passed. Seraphine's face had gone purple with rage, but she couldn't argue. The rules said the challenger had to show wisdom. Elira had done exactly that, just not in the way anyone expected. Guards released both prisoners, who stumbled from their cages. The child ran to Elira, wrapping her arms around her waist. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, my lady." Elira hugged her back, feeling something warm and protective bloom in her chest. This was why she was doing this. Not for the crown or the power, but for the chance to protect people like this child, people who deserved better than they'd been given. The nobleman approached more slowly, his expression thoughtful. "That was unexpected," he said. "Most would have chosen me, the practical choice." "I don't make choices based on rank," Elira said firmly. "I make them based on what's right." Something like respect flickered in his eyes. He bowed, a real bow, not the mocking gestures she'd received before. "Perhaps we've misjudged you, my lady." As the chamber cleared, Seraphine approached Elira with murder in her eyes. "You think you're clever," she hissed, too quietly for anyone else to hear. "You think you've won, but the third trial will destroy you. I'll make sure of it." "Do your worst," Elira said, meeting her glare steadily. "I'm still standing." That night, alone in their chambers, Darius held her close. "One more trial," he murmured. "Just one more, and this is over." "What do you think she'll do?" Elira asked. "For the trial of will?" Darius was quiet for a long moment. "She'll find your deepest fear and make you face it. Whatever you're most afraid of, losing me, losing yourself, failing everyone who's counting on you, she'll weaponize it against you." "I'm afraid of a lot of things," Elira admitted quietly. "I know, but you're also the bravest person I've ever met." He kissed her forehead. "Whatever comes tomorrow, remember, you're not alone. I'm with you. Always." But even his reassurance couldn't chase away the cold dread settling in her bones, because deep down, Elira knew exactly what her greatest fear was. And Seraphine would know it too. Dawn came for the third time, bringing with it the final trial. Elira was led not to the great hall or council chamber, but deep into the mountain, down winding stairs that seemed to descend forever, into passages lit only by flickering torches. The crowd that followed was smaller this time. Only the most important nobles, those with the stomach for whatever brutality awaited. Finally they emerged into a vast cavern. The ceiling disappeared into darkness overhead. The walls were rough stone, marked with ancient carvings. And in the center of the space was a circle of standing stones, each one carved with runes that glowed with eerie blue light. "The trial of will," Seraphine announced, her voice echoing through the cavern. "The challenger must enter the circle and face whatever the stones reveal. If she emerges sane and whole, she passes. If she breaks," the smile was vicious. "Well, we'll have our answer about her worthiness." "What's in there?" Elira asked, staring at the circle. "Your worst nightmare made real," Seraphine said simply. "The stones read your soul and manifest your deepest fear. Some face darkness, some face loss. Some face their own mortality. What you'll face," she shrugged. "I suppose we'll find out." Darius grabbed Elira's arm. "You don't have to do this. We can leave right now." "No." Elira pulled away gently. "I've come too far to turn back now." She walked toward the circle, her heart hammering against her ribs. Whatever was in there, whatever the stones would show her, she would face it. She had to. She stepped across the boundary. The world disappeared. One moment she was in the cavern, surrounded by nobles and torchlight. The next she was standing in total darkness, a void so complete it felt like she'd gone blind. "Hello?" Her voice disappeared into nothing, swallowed by the black. Then light blazed into existence. She was standing in the ballroom of House Valmere, the midsummer ball. But something was wrong. The nobles were frozen in place like statues, their faces twisted in expressions of horror and disgust. and at the center of the room stood Darius. But he wasn't looking at her with love or pride or possessiveness. He was looking at her with contempt. "Did you really think this would work?" His voice was cold, distant. "Did you honestly believe a half-blood mongrel could be my queen?" "This isn't real," Illyra whispered. "You're not him." "I am exactly him," the Phantom Darius said, stalking toward her. "I'm what he'll become once the novelty wears off, once he realizes what a burden you are, how weak, how unsuitable." He circled her like a predator. "The court will never accept you. The kingdom will tear itself apart because you're not strong enough, not smart enough, not enough of anything. And eventually, I'll realize my wolf made a mistake. That fate got it wrong." "No." Illyra backed away. "The bond is real. You felt it. I felt it." "The bond is a cruel joke," Phantom Darius snarled. "Chaining me to someone so fundamentally inadequate. You'll be the weakness that destroys everything I've built, the flaw that brings down the kingdom." The frozen nobles began to move, closing in around her. Their voices rose in a chorus of condemnation. "Unworthy. Mongrel. Mistake. She'll ruin him. Better if she'd never been born." Illyra pressed her hands over her ears, but the voices wouldn't stop. They grew louder, more insistent, drowning out her thoughts. This was her fear, her deepest terror, that she truly was everything they'd always said, worthless, broken, a burden on everyone around her, that even Darius would eventually see the truth and turn away. The Phantom Darius grabbed her face, forcing her to look at him. "You know I'm right. You've always known. You're not enough. You'll never be enough." And for a moment, just a moment, Illyra believed it. The darkness crashed over her like a wave, pulling her down into despair. All the pain of her childhood, all the mockery and rejection and loneliness, it flooded back with crushing force. She was drowning in it, suffocating under the weight of her own inadequacy. But then, through the darkness, through the fear and pain, she felt something warm. The bond. Not the Phantom's cruel mockery of it, but the real thing. Faint but present, like a golden thread stretching through the void. Darius's love and faith and absolute certainty in her worth. He believed in her even when she couldn't believe in herself. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Illyra stopped trying to run from the voices, stopped fighting the darkness. Instead, she straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and faced the Phantom Darius directly. "You're right," she said quietly. "I'm not enough. I've never been enough by their standards. I can't shift on command. I don't have centuries of noble breeding. I don't know all the political games or ancient traditions." The Phantom smiled cruelly, sensing victory. "But that's not what makes someone worthy," Illyra continued, her voice growing stronger. "I've survived years of cruelty and isolation. I've fought for every scrap of dignity I possess. I broke your rigged trial because I refused to let innocents die for the sake of tradition. And when you offered me the choice between safety and danger, I chose danger, because some things are worth fighting for." She stepped closer to the Phantom, meeting its eyes without flinching. "So maybe I'm not enough by your standards, but I'm enough for me, and I'm enough for the real Darius. The one who sees strength in survival, wisdom in compassion, and courage in standing up when every instinct says to hide." The Phantom's expression flickered with uncertainty. "You're not real," Illyra said firmly. "You're just my fear wearing his face, and I'm done being afraid." She reached out and placed her hand against the Phantom's chest. "I reject you." The Phantom Darius shattered like glass. The ballroom dissolved into light, and Illyra was standing in the cavern again, outside the circle of stones, breathing hard and covered in sweat. Silence. Then slowly, someone began to clap. It was Lord Brennan's son, the nobleman she'd saved from the cages. His applause was genuine, respectful. Others joined in, first hesitantly, then with growing enthusiasm. She'd done it. All 3 trials. Passed. Seraphine looked like she'd swallowed poison, but even she couldn't deny what everyone had witnessed. Darius was there in an instant, pulling Illyra into his arms. She could feel him trembling, with relief, with pride, with emotions too big for words. "I knew you could do it," he whispered fiercely. "I knew you were strong enough." "I almost wasn't," she admitted, her voice shaking. "It showed me you leaving, told me I wasn't worthy." "Never." His arms tightened around her. You're worth 10 kingdoms, 100, and anyone who can't see that is blind and stupid. The nobles were approaching now, one by one, bowing with genuine respect. Not all of them, some still held on to their prejudice and resentment, but enough. Enough to make a difference. Lady Kara, the mountain pack alpha who'd challenged her on the road, stepped forward. "I was wrong about you," she said bluntly. "You've got teeth hidden under that soft exterior. The packs will follow you." Even Morella offered a stiff bow, though her expression remained sour. "It seems we have a queen after all." But Seraphine stood apart, her beautiful face twisted with rage and hatred so pure it was almost palpable. "This isn't over," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "She may have passed the trials, but that doesn't change what she is. A mongrel with delusions of grandeur. Mark my words, before the year is out, she'll prove me right. She'll bring disaster down on all our heads." "That's enough, Seraphine," Darius said coldly. "You've lost. Accept it with grace, or leave my court entirely." For a moment, Seraphine looked like she might attack. Her eyes blazed with such fury that Elira instinctively stepped back, but then she got control of herself, smoothing her expression into a mask of cool disdain. "As you command, Your Majesty." The words dripped with false sweetness. "I'll be watching your precious mate very carefully, waiting for the moment she proves herself the fraud I know she is." She turned and swept from the cavern, her footsteps echoing like threats. Elira watched her go, a cold certainty settling in her gut. Seraphine wouldn't give up. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The woman would scheme and plot and wait for any opportunity to destroy her. But standing there in Darius's arms, surrounded by wolves who'd witnessed her survive impossible trials, Elira felt something new blooming in her chest. Not fear, power. She'd faced her demons and won, proved herself worthy on her own terms. And she was done apologizing for existing. Let Seraphine plot. Let the nobles scheme. She was Elira Valmer, future queen of the Northern Dominions. And she was just getting started. The coronation was set for 3 days later, and in those 3 days Elira discovered that passing the trials was only the beginning. The real work started the morning after, when Mirella appeared at dawn with a stack of documents thick enough to use as a weapon. "Your education begins now," the Chamberlain announced, dropping the papers onto the table with a heavy thud. "If you're to be queen, you need to understand the kingdom you'll be ruling. Laws, treaties, pack hierarchies, trade agreements, historical precedents, all of it." Elira stared at the mountain of parchment, her head already aching. "All of this? In 3 days? You should have thought of that before volunteering for the trials." Morella's smile was thin and sharp. "A proper noble daughter would have been trained from birth. But you're starting from nothing, so you'll need to work 3 times as hard. Unless, of course, you'd prefer to stand beside the king as an empty-headed ornament." The insult was clear, but Elira refused to rise to it. Instead, she pulled the first document toward her and began reading. The text swam before her eyes, dense legal language about territorial boundaries and tribute payments, but she forced herself to focus, to absorb every word. Darius found her hours later, still hunched over the papers, her eyes bloodshot and her hand cramping from taking notes. "You need to rest," he said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I need to learn." Elira didn't look up. "Morella's right. I don't know anything about running a kingdom. The nobles already think I'm unsuitable. I can't give them more ammunition by being ignorant." "You're not ignorant. You're inexperienced. There's a difference." "Tell that to the court." She finally looked up at him, exhaustion etched into every line of her face. "They're waiting for me to fail, Darius. Every mistake I make will be proof that they were right about me all along." He pulled a chair beside her and took her hand. "Then don't try to be perfect. Be yourself. The woman who broke their rigged trial because she refused to accept an impossible choice. The woman who faced her worst fear and came out stronger." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "That's who they need to see. Not someone pretending to be a traditional noble queen. What if being myself isn't enough? It's already more than enough." He leaned in and kissed her forehead. "But if you're determined to learn, at least let me help. I've been dealing with these treaties and contracts for years. I can show you what actually matters versus what's just bureaucratic posturing." They worked together through the afternoon, Darius explaining the real politics behind the formal language. She learned that the Northern Dominions were actually a fragile alliance of 12 major pacts, each with their own territory and traditions. Darius held them together through a combination of respect, fear, and careful balance of power. The mountain packs are the most traditional, he explained, pointing to a map. They follow the old ways strictly. Kara's pack is the largest and most influential. Then you have the forest packs, more adaptable but also more prone to infighting. The valley packs are the wealthiest because they control the trade routes. And the border packs, he paused. They're the most dangerous. They deal with external threats constantly, which makes them hardened and suspicious of outsiders. Like me. Like anyone they perceive as weak. His jaw tightened. Which is why tomorrow we're going to visit them. Alira's head snapped up. What? The border packs need to see you in person, meet you face to face. If we wait until after the coronation, they'll have time to build up resentment and conspiracy theories. But if we go now, while the victory of the trials is fresh, we might be able to win them over. Or they might kill me. They might try. His smile was predatory. But they'd have to go through me first, and I've made it very clear what happens to wolves who threaten my mate. The journey to the border territories began at first light. They traveled with a smaller escort this time, just 10 guards, because Darius said a massive show of force would be seen as aggression. The border packs responded better to strength tempered with respect. The landscape changed dramatically as they rode east. The mountains gave way to harsh, rocky plains dotted with scrub brush and twisted trees. The wind here carried the scent of something wild and dangerous, the smell of the unclaimed lands beyond the kingdom's edge, where rogue wolves and worse things hunted. They reached the first border settlement by afternoon, a cluster of wooden buildings surrounded by a high palisade wall. Guards watched from towers, their eyes tracking every movement. As Darius and Elira rode through the gates, wolves emerged from buildings and shadows, forming a loose circle around them. These wolves were different from the ones at court. Leaner, harder, with scars that told stories of brutal survival. They wore leather and fur instead of silk, carried weapons openly, and moved with the easy violence of predators who'd never known a moment's safety. A man stepped forward, massive, with a face like weathered granite and eyes that had seen too much death. His hair was iron gray, pulled back in a warrior's knot, and his arms were covered in ritual scars. "Alpha King," he said, his voice a rumble like distant thunder. "We heard you'd claimed a mate, didn't believe it until now." "Marcus Ironside." Darius dismounted smoothly. "It's been too long." "Not long enough, some would say." Marcus's gaze shifted to Elira, and she felt it like a physical weight, assessing, measuring, finding her lacking. "This is her? The half-blood who passed the trials?" Elira dismounted before Darius could help her, meeting Marcus's stare directly. She'd learned something in those 3 trials, that showing weakness invited attack. The border wolves would respect strength or nothing at all. "I'm Elira Valmere," she said clearly. "And yes, I passed the trials, all 3. "So we heard." Marcus moved closer, circling her the way Kara had done on the road. "Word is you shifted into something strange, something old." "Moonborn," Darius said quietly. The effect was electric. Every wolf in earshot went still, their expressions shifting from skepticism to shock to something that might have been fear. "That's impossible," Marcus said flatly. "The Moonborn bloodline died out centuries ago, during the Purge." "Apparently not." Darius's hand found Elira's, a gesture of solidarity and possession. "My mate carries their blood, which means she's under my protection and the protection of ancient law. Any wolf who harms her answers not just to me, but to traditions older than any of our packs." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his scarred face unreadable. Then he threw back his head and laughed, a sound like breaking rocks. "The border packs don't care about bloodlines, old or new," he announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We care about strength, survival, whether someone can stand beside us when the rogue wolves come screaming out of the wastes." He turned back to Elira. "Can you fight, little queen, or are you just good at passing court tests?" The challenge was unmistakable. Elira felt Darius tense beside her, but she squeezed his hand, a silent message to let her handle this. "I can fight," she said, "though I'm still learning." I only shifted for the first time 3 days ago. 3 days? Marcus's eyebrows rose. And you took down 4 warriors in the trial of strength? Instinct, Elira admitted, and desperation. I didn't really know what I was doing. Another wolf might have mocked her honesty, but Marcus just nodded slowly, something like approval in his hard eyes. Honesty, that's rare in southern nobles. He gestured to a cleared space in the center of the settlement. Show me your wolf. Let the border packs see what we're being asked to follow. Elira's heart hammered. She'd only shifted twice, once during the trial, once last night in their chambers when Darius had helped her practice. Each time had been painful, difficult, like forcing her body into a shape it didn't quite remember. But she couldn't refuse. Not here, not now. She walked to the center of the circle, feeling dozens of eyes on her. The border wolves had gathered now, forming a ring of judgment. These were the kingdom's first line of defense, the wolves who bled and died to keep the others safe. If she couldn't win their respect, she'd never truly be queen. Elira closed her eyes and reached for that place inside her, the space where her wolf lived. It was easier to find now, like a door that had been locked. Her whole life had finally opened. She felt the heat building in her chest, the bond with Darius humming like a plucked string. The shift took her. Pain and power and transformation, bones breaking and reforming, muscles tearing and rebuilding, senses exploding outward. When she opened her eyes, the world had changed, sharper, brighter, full of scents and sounds she'd never noticed before. She stood on 4 legs, silver-white fur gleaming in the afternoon sun. The border wolves stared in silence. Then, one by one, they began to shift themselves, a rippling wave of transformation that swept through the crowd. Within moments, Elira was surrounded by wolves in their true forms, browns and grays and blacks, each one scarred and battle-hardened. Marcus shifted last, a massive dark gray wolf with white around his muzzle and eyes like amber fire. He padded forward until he stood directly in front of her. Then he bowed his head. It was a small gesture, barely noticeable to someone who didn't understand wolf hierarchy, but it meant everything: recognition, acknowledgement, the beginning of respect. The other border wolves followed suit, dipping their heads in a gesture older than words. Elira felt something shift in her chest, not the bond with Darius, but something else. A connection forming between her and these wolves, like invisible threads weaving themselves between souls. Was this what it meant to be moonborn? To feel the pack bonds, to sense the connections between wolves? She shifted back to human form, the transformation smoother this time. Marcus did the same, his weathered face showing something that might have been satisfaction. The border packs will honor you, he said simply. Not because of your bloodline or your crown, but because you came here and showed us your wolf without flinching. That takes courage. He glanced at Darius. She might actually survive being your queen. High praise from you, Marcus. Don't let it go to her head. But there was warmth in his gruff voice. Now come, we feast tonight, and tomorrow you should visit the eastern settlements. They'll want to see her too. They spent 3 days touring the border territories, visiting settlement after settlement. Each time, Elira shifted and showed them her wolf. Each time she spoke honestly about her inexperience and her determination to learn. And each time, the border wolves gave her the same grudging respect they'd given Marcus. By the time they returned to Thornhaven, something had changed. Word had spread through the kingdom, not the gossip and speculation of the nobles, but something deeper. The border packs had accepted her. The wolves who bled for the kingdom had chosen to follow her. It was a power base the court couldn't ignore. The coronation took place in the Great Hall, transformed for the occasion with banners and flowers and enough candles to light the night sky. Every noble house in the northern dominions sent representatives. The hall was packed so tightly, people stood shoulder to shoulder, all craning for a view of the ceremony. Elira wore a gown of silver and blue, the colors of the royal house, with her mother's necklace at her throat. Her hair had been arranged in elaborate braids woven with pearls and sapphires. She looked every inch a queen, even if she still felt like an impostor wearing borrowed clothes. Darius stood beside his throne, magnificent in black and silver, his crown a simple circlet of dark metal. But it was the way he looked at her that made her heart race, like she was the only person in the entire hall, the only thing that mattered in his world. The ceremony was conducted by Elder Thorn, the oldest wolf in the kingdom, an ancient woman so bent with age she needed 2 attendants to help her walk, but her voice was still strong when she spoke. We gather to witness the coronation of Illyra Valmer as Queen of the Northern Dominions. She has passed the 3 trials. She has proven her strength, her wisdom, and her will. She has been accepted by the border pacts and acknowledged by the court. Does anyone challenge her right to rule? Silence. Illyra had half expected Seraphine to make one last desperate protest, but the woman stood in the crowd, her face a mask of cold fury, saying nothing. She'd lost, and she knew it. Then let the bond be sealed, Elder Thorn continued. Darius took Illyra's hand and led her to kneel before the elder. The old woman produced a ceremonial blade, silver, marked with runes similar to the ones on Illyra's wolf form. Blood to blood, Elder Thorn intoned, soul to soul, bound by fate and choice alike. She made a small cut on Darius's palm, then on Illyra's. They pressed their hands together, blood mingling as the bond between them flared to brilliant life. Illyra gasped as power surged through her, not just Darius's strength, but something bigger. The collective strength of every wolf in the hall, every pack in the kingdom. She could feel them all, a vast network of connections spreading out like roots through the earth. This was what it meant to be Moonborn, to feel the pack bonds, to be connected to every wolf in ways that went deeper than law or politics. Elder Thorn placed a crown on Illyra's head, silver worked into the shape of running wolves, with sapphires for eyes. It was lighter than she'd expected, but the weight of what it represented was immense. Rise, Queen Illyra of the Northern Dominions, rise and take your place beside your king. Illyra stood, and the hall erupted in cheers. Not everyone was celebrating. She could see pockets of sour faces, nobles who still resented her rise. But they were the minority now. Most of the crowd was genuinely happy, genuinely ready to accept her. She'd done it. Against impossible odds, despite every obstacle thrown in her path, she'd become queen. Darius pulled her close and kissed her, deep and possessive, in front of the entire court. Through the bond, she felt his pride and love and fierce protectiveness. My queen, he murmured against her lips. My mate, my miracle. Your problem, she whispered back, making him laugh. The feast that followed lasted until dawn. Illyra moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and well wishes, learning names and faces, beginning the endless work of building relationships with the noble houses. It was exhausting, but she was determined to do it right. Halfway through the night, Lady Kara approached, the mountain pack alpha who'd challenged her on the road. You've surprised me, Kara said bluntly. I didn't think you'd survive the trials, let alone win the border pack's loyalty. I'm as surprised as you are, Illyra admitted. Don't be. Kara's expression was serious. You've got something the kingdom's needed for a long time. Not just strength, we've got plenty of that, but the ability to see beyond bloodlines and tradition, to choose people over politics. She paused. The mountain packs will follow you. You've earned that. It was perhaps the highest compliment Kara could give. Illyra felt tears prickling her eyes, but blinked them back. Thank you, she said quietly. That means more than you know. As Kara moved away, another figure approached, Lord Brennan's son, the nobleman she'd saved from the cages. Your Majesty, he said, bowing deeply, I wanted to thank you for choosing to save us both during the trial. My father told me what you did, how you refused to accept the false choice. I couldn't let either of you die just to prove a point, Illyra said. That's exactly why we need you. His expression was earnest. The old ways demand sacrifice, tradition over compassion, rank over humanity. But you showed us there's another way. A better way. He hesitated, then added, House Stormclaw pledges its full support to you, my queen. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, you have our loyalty. More nobles approached throughout the night, offering similar pledges. Not all of them. Seraphine and her faction remained hostile and distant, but enough. More than enough. By the time the feast finally wound down and Illyra could escape to her chambers, she was exhausted, but triumphant. She'd survived. More than survived. She'd won. Darius found her on the balcony, looking out over the valley where Thornhaven spread like a carpet of lights. What are you thinking? He asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. That I can't believe this is real, she admitted. A month ago, I was the girl no one wanted, the family embarrassment hiding against marble pillars. And now, Now you're queen of the most powerful wolf kingdom in the north. He kissed her neck. And you earned every bit of it. I'm going to make changes, Elira said quietly. Real changes. The way the court treats half-bloods, the way rank determines worth. It's wrong, Darius. I want to fix it. I know. That's one of the things I love about you. His arms tightened around her. But be careful. Change threatens those who benefit from the old ways. Seraphine isn't the only one who'll fight you. Let them fight. Elira turned in his arms to face him. I've already survived impossible trials and won over the border packs. Whatever comes next, I can handle it. He smiled, fierce and proud. That's my queen. They stood together on the balcony as the sun began to rise over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. A new day. A new beginning. But even as Elira basked in her victory, she felt a cold prickle of warning down her spine. Seraphine hadn't made a scene at the coronation, hadn't challenged her openly. That wasn't like the woman who'd designed brutal trials meant to break her. No, Seraphine was planning something, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The thought should have frightened her. A week ago, it would have sent her spiraling into anxiety and self-doubt. But she wasn't the same person she'd been a week ago. She was Queen Elira now. She'd faced her worst fears and emerged stronger. She'd won the loyalty of the border packs and the respect of the court. She had power, real power, and the knowledge of how to use it. Whatever Seraphine was planning, Elira would be ready. The game had changed, and this time Elira was playing to win. 2 weeks after the coronation, Elira was in the royal library, a vast cavern carved into the mountain, lined with shelves that stretched toward the darkness overhead, when a messenger found her. Your Majesty, the young wolf bowed deeply. There's been an incident in the valley settlements. A group of half-blood children were attacked by nobles who claimed they were cleaning up mongrel trash. 3 children are injured. The local authorities did nothing to stop it. Rage, white-hot and pure, flooded through Elira's veins. This was exactly what she'd feared. The old prejudices finding new targets, emboldened by those who resented her rise. Get me names, she said, her voice deadly calm. Every noble involved, every authority who stood by and did nothing. And prepare my horse. I'm going to the valley settlements immediately. Your Majesty, perhaps you should consult with the king. I am the queen, Elira interrupted. I don't need permission to protect my people. Now move. The messenger fled. Elira rode into the valley settlement with 20 guards at her back and fury in her heart. The nobles responsible were easy to find. They were still there, laughing about their attack in the local tavern, confident they'd face no consequences. They stopped laughing when the queen walked through the door. You attacked children, Elira said, her voice cutting through the sudden silence like a blade. Injured them because of their bloodline, because you think being born half-blood makes them less than wolves. The lead noble, a portly man with a weak chin and cruel eyes, sneered at her. They are less than wolves. Everyone knows it. Just because you managed to trick the king into mating with you doesn't change. He didn't get to finish. Elira crossed the space between them in 3 strides and backhanded him with enough force to send him sprawling. The tavern erupted in shocked gasps. I am your queen, Elira said, her voice like ice, and I will not tolerate violence against children, any children. I don't care about their bloodlines or their parents' status. They are under my protection. She looked at the guards. Arrest them, all of them. They'll stand trial for assault. You can't do this, another noble spluttered. We're from House Ravencrest. We have rights. You have the right to a fair trial, Elira said coldly, which is more than you gave those children. Take them away. As the guards dragged the protesting nobles out, Elira turned to the local authorities who'd done nothing to stop the attack. You failed in your duty, she said quietly. You saw children being hurt and did nothing because you thought their bloodline made them unworthy of protection. That ends now. Consider yourselves stripped of authority pending review. She left the tavern and went directly to the healer's building where the injured children were being tended. They were so young. The oldest, maybe 10, the youngest barely 6. All bore bruises and cuts, marks of senseless cruelty. Elira sat with them, held their hands, listened to their frightened stories. And with each word, her resolve hardened. This was why she'd fought so hard. Not for the crown or the power, but for this. the chance to protect people who had no one else to protect them. "You're safe now," she told them gently. "I promise. No one will hurt you again." When she returned to Thornhaven that evening, she found Darius waiting in their chambers, his expression carefully neutral. "I heard about your visit to the Valley settlements," he said. "I did what was necessary. You arrested nobles from 4 different houses without consulting the council. You stripped local authorities of their positions. You've made powerful enemies, Illyra." "Good." She met his eyes steadily. "Let them be my enemies. I won't stand by while children are brutalized in my kingdom." For a moment they just stared at each other. Then Darius smiled, a fierce, wild expression that reminded her why everyone feared him. "You magnificent woman," he said, pulling her into his arms. "You're going to turn this kingdom upside down, aren't you?" "I'm going to make it better," she corrected, "whether the nobles like it or not." "They won't like it. Some of them will fight you." "Then I'll fight back." She looked up at him. "I didn't survive the trials and win the border pacts just to be a decorative queen who smiles and nods while injustice happens. I'm going to use this power for something that matters." "I know." He kissed her forehead. "That's why I love you. That's why my wolf chose you. You have the strength to change things that need changing." The next day, Illyra called an emergency council session. Every major noble house sent representatives, their faces ranging from curious to hostile. "I've called you here to announce new policies," Illyra began, standing beside Darius's throne with her crown glinting in the torchlight. "Effective immediately, violence against any citizen of the Northern Dominions, regardless of bloodline, will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. No exceptions for rank or status." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some approving, others outraged. "Furthermore," Illyra continued, "I'm establishing shelters in every major settlement. Safe places for abandoned children, half-bloods, and anyone else who needs protection. These shelters will be funded by the royal treasury and protected by royal decree." "Your Majesty!" Lord Cassian rose to his feet, his face red. "This is madness. You're talking about coddling mongrels and half-breeds, wasting royal resources on children," Illyra interrupted coldly. "On wolves who deserve the same protections as anyone else. Unless you're suggesting that some lives matter less than others based solely on their parentage?" The trap was elegant. If Cassian agreed, he'd be admitting to prejudice that would disgust even traditional wolves. If he disagreed, he'd have to accept her policy. He sat down, fuming. "This is just the beginning," Illyra said, looking around the council chamber. "I intend to review every law, every tradition, every practice that values bloodline over merit. The Northern Dominions will be a kingdom where anyone can rise based on their own strength and character, not who their parents were." The chamber erupted into heated debate. Some nobles rose to support her. Others protested vehemently. But through it all, Illyra stood firm, her spine straight and her voice unwavering. She was no longer the girl who hid against marble pillars, desperate to be invisible. She was the queen who would reshape a kingdom. And nothing, not tradition, not prejudice, not fear, would stop her. The rebellion came 3 months later, exactly as Darius had predicted. Illyra was in the newly established shelter in Thornhaven's lower district, a converted warehouse now filled with beds, warm blankets, and the laughter of children who'd finally found safety. When the warning bells began to ring. The sound was unmistakable. 3 sharp peals followed by silence, then 3 more. Attack. Threat to the crown. "Your Majesty, we need to get you to the fortress immediately." Captain Ryden, head of her personal guard, appeared at her elbow, his hand already on his sword. "What's happening?" "Reports are still coming in, but it looks like an armed force approaching from the south. Noble houses, maybe 6 of them, marching under a united banner." His jaw tightened. "They're calling themselves the Purity Alliance. They're demanding you step down as queen." Illyra felt ice flood her veins. She'd known this was coming. The nobles who resented her reforms had been growing louder and more organized, but knowing didn't make it less terrifying. "How many?" "At least 300 armed wolves, maybe more." 300, against the crown's standing forces of roughly 500, not counting the scattered border packs who might not arrive in time. "Get the children to safety," Illyra ordered, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. Use the underground tunnels to evacuate them to the mountain strongholds. Then meet me at the fortress. Your Majesty. Now, Captain. The ride back to the fortress was a blur of pounding hooves and racing thoughts. By the time Elira reached the courtyard, Darius was already there, dressed in battle armor and surrounded by his war council. His face was a mask of controlled fury. "They've demanded a formal audience," he said without preamble. "Lord Cassian is leading them, along with houses Ravencrest, Ironwood, Blackthorn, Silvermane, and Nightshade. They claim you've corrupted the kingdom with your mongrel-loving policies and demand I set you aside for a proper queen." "Seraphine," Elira said quietly. Darius nodded grimly. "She's with them. Probably the one who organized this whole thing. She's been building this alliance for months, waiting for the right moment. So what do? We crush them." His eyes blazed amber. "I'll take the royal guard and—" "No!" Elira's voice cut through his battle planning like a blade. "If you slaughter half the noble houses, the kingdom will tear itself apart. There'll be blood feuds that last generations. Civil war. Then what do you suggest? Let them dictate terms?" "I suggest we give them what they want. An audience. A chance to make their case before the entire court." She met his incredulous stare steadily. "And then I'll prove them wrong." Morella appeared, her face tight with tension. "Your Majesty, they're demanding you answer for specific crimes. They have a list: interference with noble privileges, misuse of royal funds, promoting half-bloods to positions of authority, corrupting traditional wolf values." Her lips thinned. "They're calling for your arrest and trial." "On what grounds?" Darius snarled. "Treason against the wolf way of life." Morella's expression was carefully neutral. "It's an old law, almost never invoked. But technically, any queen who acts against the fundamental interests of wolf society can be charged." "That's insane." "It's politics," Elira interrupted quietly. "They're using the law to legitimize their coup. Make it look like justice instead of rebellion." She looked at Darius. "If I refuse the trial, they'll say I'm afraid, that I know I'm guilty. But if I face them, you could lose," Darius said flatly. "If the council votes against you, the law requires I set you aside or abdicate. Either way, we lose everything we've built." "Then I'd better not lose." Elira tried to smile, though her heart was racing. "I've beaten impossible odds before. I can do it again." He grabbed her shoulders, his grip almost painful. "This isn't a trial, Elira. It's an execution dressed up in legal language. They'll stack the council, manipulate the proceedings." "I know." She placed her hands over his. "But what choice do we have? Fight them and start a civil war? Run away and abandon everyone counting on us? Or stand and face them and trust that truth and justice still means something?" For a long moment, Darius just stared at her. Then he pulled her into a fierce embrace. "If anything happens to you," he whispered into her hair, "there won't be enough pieces of them left to bury." "Nothing's going to happen to me." She pulled back to look at him. "I'm not the scared girl hiding at the ball anymore. I'm the queen who passed the trials, who won the border pacts, who's been changing this kingdom for the better, and I'm not going to let them take that away." The trial was set for the following day, giving both sides time to prepare their cases. Elira spent the night reviewing laws and precedents with a small team of advisors who remained loyal. Lord Brennan's son, a sharp-minded young scholar named Thomas, who believed in her reforms, and surprisingly, Morella. "Why are you helping me?" Elira asked the chamberlain during a brief break. "You've never liked me." Morella was quiet for a moment, her ancient eyes unreadable. "I didn't like you," she admitted. "You represented chaos, change, everything I'd spent decades trying to control." She paused. "But then I watched you transform this kingdom in 3 months. The shelters are full of children who would have died on the streets. Half-bloods are getting fair treatment for the first time in centuries. The border packs are more loyal than they've been in my lifetime." She met Elira's eyes. "I was wrong about you. You're not chaos. You're exactly what this kingdom needed." The admission was staggering. Elira felt tears prickling her eyes, but blinked them back. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We still have to win this trial. And Seraphine is very, very good at manipulating council votes." The Great Hall had been transformed into a courtroom. Tiered seating surrounded a central floor where 2 tables faced each other, one for the prosecution, one for the defense. The council sat in a semicircle at the head of the room, 12 judges representing the major pacts and noble houses. And half of them, Illyra knew, had already been bought or intimidated by Seraphine's faction. The hall was packed with spectators. Every noble in Thornhaven had come to witness either her vindication or her destruction. The border wolves were there too, Marcus Ironside and his warriors standing in a grim cluster, their scarred faces set with determination. Lady Cara and the mountain packs occupied another section, their presence a silent show of support. But the opposition was strong too. Seraphine sat at the prosecution table, beautiful and poisonous in black silk, her smile sharp as broken glass. Beside her sat Lord Cassian and representatives from the rebel houses, their faces carved with righteous certainty. Darius sat on his throne, forced by law to remain neutral during the proceedings. But Illyra could feel his rage and fear through the bond, a constant burning presence at the edge of her awareness. Elder Thorn, the ancient wolf who'd performed the coronation, called the proceedings to order. We gather to hear charges against Queen Illyra of the Northern Dominions. The prosecution may present their case. Lord Cassian rose, his chest puffed with self-importance. Honorable Council, we come before you today to expose a fraud that threatens the very foundation of our society. This woman, he gestured dismissively at Illyra, has abused her position to promote half-bloods over pure wolves, to waste royal resources on mongrels, and to corrupt our sacred traditions with soft-hearted sentiment. Those are accusations, not evidence, Thomas called out from the defense table. I'm getting to the evidence. Cassian's smile was oily. Since taking the throne, Queen Illyra has established 9 shelters at royal expense, shelters that house primarily half-bloods and other undesirables. She's promoted half-bloods to positions of authority in local governance. She's prosecuted noble wolves for the crime of disciplining mongrel children. And she's proposed changes to inheritance laws that would allow half-bloods to claim noble titles. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Illyra kept her expression carefully neutral, even as her stomach twisted with anxiety. Each of these actions, Cassian continued, violates the fundamental principle of wolf society, that pure blood and noble lineage are the foundation of our strength. By elevating mongrels, she weakens us all. By spending resources on the unworthy, she steals from those who deserve it. And by corrupting our traditions, she threatens our very survival as a people. He turned to face the council directly. The law is clear. A queen who acts against the fundamental interests of wolf society can be removed for treason. We ask this council to recognize that Queen Illyra's actions constitute such treason, and to demand her removal from the throne. Applause erupted from the rebel faction. Illyra felt the weight of hostile stares pressing down on her like physical force. Elder Thorn called for silence. The defense may respond. Illyra rose slowly, her heart pounding, but her hands steady. She'd prepared a careful legal argument, researched precedents and counter-arguments. But standing there, looking at the faces in the crowd, some hopeful, some hateful, all waiting to see what she would do, she knew that dry legal reasoning wouldn't win this fight. She needed to speak to their hearts. Lord Cassian says I've acted against the fundamental interests of wolf society, she began, her voice carrying across the silent hall. But what are those interests, really? She walked forward, moving away from the defense table. Is our fundamental interest to preserve bloodlines that grow weaker with each generation of inbreeding? To maintain noble houses that produce more cowards and fools than warriors? To waste potential by judging wolves based on who their parents were, rather than who they choose to become? That's not, Cassian began, but Elder Thorn silenced him with a raised hand. Illyra continued, gaining confidence with each word. I am half-blood. Everyone in this room knows it. According to Lord Cassian's logic, I should be worthless, weak, unfit to lead. She paused. And yet I passed the 3 trials. I shifted into a form that scared seasoned warriors. I won the loyalty of the border packs, the wolves who bleed and die to keep the rest of you safe. She turned to face the council. If bloodline determines worth, then explain that. Explain how a half-blood mongrel accomplished what dozens of pure-blooded noble daughters could not. Explain how the border packs, who care only about strength and survival, chose to follow me. Marcus Ironside rose from his seat, his scarred face grim. I'll explain it, he rumbled. The border packs follow strength and honor, not bloodlines. Queen Illyra showed us both. She came to our settlements, shifted her wolf before us, spoke honestly about her weaknesses, and her determination to overcome them. He looked at the council. That takes more courage than most purebloods ever display. So yes, we follow her, and we'll keep following her, half-blood or not. Kara stood next. The mountain packs agree. We've watched this queen for 3 months. She doesn't hide behind privilege or make promises she can't keep. She acts. She protects the weak. She fights for justice even when it's difficult. The alpha's voice was fierce. That's the kind of leader wolves should follow. Not someone who happened to be born into the right family. More voices rose from the crowd. Wolves Elira had helped, nobles whose children had been saved by the shelters, common wolves who'd seen their lives improve under her reforms. One by one, they testified to her character and her actions. But Seraphine's faction pushed back just as hard, calling witnesses who spoke of tradition violated and pure blood corrupted. The battle raged for hours, testimonies and counter-testimonies flying back and forth. The council remained impassive, giving nothing away. Finally, Elder Thorn called for closing arguments. Seraphine rose, and Elira felt a chill run down her spine. This was the moment the woman had been waiting for, her chance to destroy everything Elira had built. "Honorable Council," Seraphine began, her voice like poisoned honey. "We've heard many pretty words today about justice and courage and reform. But pretty words don't change fundamental truth. This woman is half-blood. She lacks the pure wolf heritage that has sustained our kingdom for centuries, and no matter how many trials she passes or border pacts she charms, that fact remains." She moved closer to the council, her green eyes blazing. "But my argument isn't really about her bloodline. It's about precedent. If we allow a half-blood to rule, what's next? Do we allow humans to join our packs? Do we abandon shifting altogether? Do we become so diluted that we're no longer wolves at all, but some mongrel hybrid that belongs to no world?" The fear in her words was deliberate and effective. Elira could see some of the council members wavering. "The old ways exist for a reason," Seraphine continued. "They've kept us strong for thousands of years, kept our bloodlines pure and our power intact." Queen Elira would throw that away for sentiment, for soft-hearted compassion that will ultimately weaken us. She turned to face the throne where Darius sat frozen. "I ask this council to remove her, not out of cruelty but out of love for what we are, out of determination to preserve wolf society for future generations." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Elira stood. "May I respond?" she asked Elder Thorn. The ancient wolf nodded. Elira walked to the center of the floor, feeling hundreds of eyes on her. This was it. Everything came down to what she said next. "Lady Seraphine is right about one thing," she began quietly. "The old ways have sustained wolf society for thousands of years. They've provided structure, stability, a clear understanding of who we are." She paused, letting that sink in. "But the old ways also created me, a child so convinced of her own worthlessness that she spent 22 years believing she was broken. A girl who thought she deserved mockery and abuse because her blood wasn't pure enough." Her voice grew stronger. "The old ways told my sister she was valuable because of who her parents were, not who she chose to be. They told Lord Cassian he deserved authority because of his bloodline, not his wisdom or strength. They told every half-blood child in this kingdom that they were less than, unworthy, better off dead." She looked directly at the council. "So yes, I'm trying to change those ways. Not to destroy wolf society, but to save it from its own worst impulses. Because a kingdom that judges worth by bloodline alone is a kingdom that will eventually collapse under the weight of its own stagnation." Elira's eyes swept across the crowd, finding the faces of the children she'd helped, the half-bloods she'd protected, the wolves who'd been given a chance to prove themselves. "Lady Seraphine asks what's next if we allow a half-blood to rule. I'll tell you what's next. We get stronger. We stop wasting the potential of wolves who have the talent and drive to serve, but lack the proper parentage. We become a kingdom where anyone can rise based on their own merit, where children don't have to spend their lives believing they're worthless." She turned back to the council. "I am half-blood. I am also your queen. And I've proven that those two things are not contradictory. I've passed trials that would break most purebloods. I've won the loyalty of the border packs and mountain packs. I've established shelters that save lives and reforms that make justice accessible to everyone." Her voice dropped to something quieter but no less powerful. So the question before this council isn't really about my bloodline. It's about what kind of kingdom you want to be. One that clings to tradition even when it causes suffering, or one that has the courage to grow, to change, to become something better. Silence fell across the hall. Elder Thorne looked at the council. We will deliberate and return with a verdict. The 12 judges filed out through a side door. The crowd erupted into anxious conversation. Elira returned to the defense table on shaking legs, her burst of confidence draining away now that the moment had passed. That was extraordinary, Thomas breathed. I've never heard anyone speak like that. It won't matter if the council votes against me, Elira said quietly. Darius appeared beside her, apparently unable to remain on his throne any longer. He pulled her into his arms, not caring who saw. Whatever happens, he said fiercely, I'm not letting you go. Council be damned, law be damned, you're mine. And start a civil war? She pulled back to look at him. Darius, we can't. Watch me. His eyes blazed. I've followed the law my entire life, built this kingdom through careful politics and strategic alliances, but if they try to take you from me, I will burn it all down. Every law, every tradition, every noble house that stands in my way. The raw intensity in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it made her feel safe, protected, loved with a ferocity that transcended politics or law. But she also knew they couldn't actually go through with it. A kingdom torn apart by civil war would suffer far worse than anything Seraphine's faction could inflict. The council returned after what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes. Their faces were carefully neutral, revealing nothing. Elder Thorne stood. We have reached a decision. The hall fell silent. Elira could hear her own heartbeat, feel Darius's hand gripping hers with bruising force. On the charge of treason against Wolf Society, Elder Thorne announced, this council finds Queen Elira. The pause seemed to last forever. Not guilty. Chaos erupted. Half the hall roared with approval, wolves leaping to their feet and cheering. The other half exploded in outrage, nobles shouting protests and accusations of bias. Elira stood frozen, unable to process what she'd just heard. Not guilty. She'd won. Elder Thorne's voice cut through the chaos. The vote was 7-5 in the Queen's favor. The Council recognizes that while her methods are unconventional, her actions have demonstrably strengthened the kingdom. The charges are dismissed. Seraphine's face had gone white with rage. She stood abruptly, her chair clattering backward. This is a travesty, she shouted. You're condemning us all to mongrel rule, to the destruction of everything we've built. She whirled to face the crowd. Who stands with me? Who's willing to fight for the purity of our bloodlines? For a moment, Elira thought there might actually be violence. Seraphine's faction looked ready to attack, their hands moving toward concealed weapons. But then Marcus Ironside moved. The massive border wolf stepped forward, placing himself directly between Seraphine and the throne. The council has spoken, he rumbled. The law has been followed. Anyone who continues this rebellion is a traitor, and we'll treat them accordingly. Kara joined him, along with a dozen mountain pack wolves. The border and mountain packs together represented the most battle-hardened warriors in the kingdom. No one was stupid enough to fight them. Seraphine trembled with fury, her beautiful face twisted into something ugly and hateful. This isn't over, she hissed. You think you've won, but you've only delayed the inevitable. The purebloods will rise again, and when you do, you'll face the same justice as anyone else. Darius's voice cut through her threats like a blade. He descended from his throne, radiating lethal power. You've lost, Seraphine. Accept it with grace or face the consequences of continued rebellion. For a long moment, they stared at each other, the king and the woman who'd wanted to be his queen. Then Seraphine laughed, wild and bitter. You deserve each other, she spat. A mongrel queen and a king fool enough to love her. I hope you're both happy when this kingdom tears itself apart. She stormed from the hall, her supporters following in her wake. But Elira noticed that several nobles who'd stood with the rebellion remained behind, looking uncertain and ashamed. Lord Cassian approached slowly, his face haggard. Your Majesty, he said to Elira, his voice rough. I was wrong about you. I let fear and prejudice cloud my judgment. I see that now. Elira studied him for a long moment. The easy thing would be to reject his apology, to punish him for his rebellion. But that wasn't the kind of queen she wanted to be. I understand fear, she said quietly. Change is frightening, but fear shouldn't be an excuse for cruelty. If you truly want to make amends, help me build the kingdom we both want to see. One where everyone has a chance to prove their worth. Cassian's eyes widened with surprise. Then he bowed deeply, genuine respect in the gesture. It would be my honor, Your Majesty. Other nobles followed his example, one by one, offering apologies and pledges of loyalty. Not all of them. Some slipped away quietly, still clinging to their prejudices. But enough. More than enough. That night, Alira stood on the balcony of the royal chambers, looking out over Thornhaven. The city gleamed in the moonlight, peaceful and beautiful. Somewhere down there, children were sleeping safely in the shelters she'd built. Half-bloods were living without fear of violence. Wolves were learning that worth came from character, not bloodline. She'd changed things, really changed them. Darius joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her back against his chest. "What are you thinking?" he murmured. "That I can't believe we actually won. We didn't just win, we transformed the kingdom." His lips brushed her neck. Seraphine was right about one thing. Nothing will ever be the same. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's the best thing. He turned her in his arms to face him. You've given hope to thousands of wolves who thought they'd never matter. You've proven that the old ways aren't sacred, they're just old. And you've shown everyone, including me, that real strength comes from surviving impossible odds and still choosing compassion. Alira felt tears prickling her eyes. I was so scared. During the trial, I thought I was going to lose everything. But you didn't. You stood up and fought with nothing but truth and courage. And you won. His hand cupped her cheek. You're the most remarkable person I've ever met, Alira, and I thank fate every day that my wolf chose yours. They kissed as the moon rose higher, painting everything in silver light. Through their bond, Alira could feel his love and pride and absolute certainty that they'd made the right choice. The months that followed brought more challenges, of course. Seraphine disappeared into the southern territories where rumors said she was plotting some new revenge. Some noble houses refused to accept the new order and isolated themselves in their estates. Change was never easy or complete. But the shelters flourished. Half-bloods began serving in positions of real authority. The border and mountain packs grew even more loyal as they saw Alira's reforms protecting the wolves they cared about, and slowly, grudgingly, the kingdom began to transform. 6 months after the trial, Alira received an unexpected letter. The seal was familiar. House Valmir. Her father's house, the place she'd fled. She opened it with trembling hands. The letter was from Cylindra. Dear sister, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness for the cruelty I showed you. But I needed you to know that I was wrong about everything. Father has told me the truth about Mother, that she wasn't human at all, but moonborn. That he hid it out of fear and ambition, thinking he could control the power in your bloodline. When you couldn't shift, he convinced himself you were defective rather than admit he didn't understand what you were. I was cruel to you because I was jealous. Jealous that despite everything, despite being told you were worthless, you had a strength I never possessed. The strength to endure, to survive, to become something magnificent. I hear the stories about you, the queen who changed the kingdom, who protects the powerless and fights for justice. Part of me wants to hate you for proving that bloodline means nothing, that I wasted my life believing I was valuable simply because of who our parents were. But mostly, I'm just proud that my sister, the girl everyone mocked, became the greatest queen the Northern Dominions has ever known. I don't ask for a response. I just wanted you to know. With regret and respect, Cylindra Alira read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't a full apology. It didn't erase the years of cruelty, but it was something, an acknowledgement, the beginning of healing. Darius found her still holding the letter, her eyes red from crying. Good news or bad? He asked gently. Good, I think. She showed him the letter. My sister finally understands. Are you going to respond? Alira thought about it for a long moment. The old Alira, the one who'd been so desperate for acceptance, would have leapt at the chance to reconnect with her family, but she wasn't that person anymore. Maybe eventually, she said, but not yet. I need more time, and she needs to prove that this isn't just empty words. That's wise. He pulled her close. You've learned to value yourself. That's the greatest transformation of all. A year after her coronation, Alira stood in the Great Hall once again. But this time, it wasn't for a trial or a test. It was for a celebration. The first class of students was graduating from the Royal Academy, a new institution Alira had founded to train wolves regardless of bloodline. Half-bloods studied alongside purebloods, learning combat, diplomacy, law, and leadership. Alira watched them cross the stage one by one, receiving their certifications. Some would go on to serve in local governance. Others would join the border patrols. A few showed promise as future council members. Among them was the little girl from the Valley settlement, the one who'd been attacked by nobles and saved by Alira's intervention. She was 13 now, confident and strong, and she'd scored highest in her class in combat training. When she crossed the stage, she paused to look up at Alira. "Thank you, Your Majesty," she said, her voice clear and proud, "for showing me I could be more than what they said I was." Alira felt her throat tighten with emotion. "You did that yourself. I just gave you the opportunity." The girl smiled and moved on, but her words stayed with Alira long after the ceremony ended. That night, Alira and Darius hosted a small dinner for their closest allies, Marcus, Cara, Lord Brennan's son, Thomas, and Mirella. They ate and drank and told stories, celebrating how far they'd all come. "To the Queen who changed everything," Marcus raised his glass. "May she continue disrupting tradition and making us all uncomfortable for years to come." Laughter rippled around the table. Alira raised her own glass, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with wine spreading through her chest. "To all of you," she said, "who took a chance on a half-blood mongrel and helped her become something more. I couldn't have done any of this alone." "You could have," Cara said seriously, "but you chose not to. That's what makes you a great queen. You understand that strength comes from unity, not isolation." As the evening wound down and their guests departed, Alira found herself back on the balcony with Darius, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Choosing me over a traditional noble queen? Your life would be so much simpler if—" "Don't." He cut her off, turning her to face him. "Don't ever question my choice. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, to this kingdom. I wouldn't change a single thing. Not even the rebellion, the trial, the constant fighting with stubborn nobles? Not even that." His smile was fierce. "Because all of it led to this. To you, standing here as queen. To a kingdom that's stronger and more just than it's ever been. To a future where wolves are judged by their character instead of their bloodline." He pulled her close, and they stood together in the moonlight, two souls bound by something deeper than law or tradition. "I love you," Alira whispered, "for seeing me when no one else did, for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." "I love you," he echoed, "for teaching me that the old ways weren't sacred, just old, for showing me what real courage looks like, for being exactly who you are, without apology or compromise." Years later, when Alira was old and her silver hair matched her wolf's fur, she would tell her grandchildren, both pure blood and half-blood, because bloodline no longer mattered in the kingdom she'd helped build, about the night that changed everything. The night a lonely king crossed a crowded ballroom to reach the girl no one wanted. The night she discovered she was more than what others said she was. The night she learned that survival could transform into something magnificent. She would tell them about the trials, about the rebellion, about standing before a hostile council and defending not just herself but everyone who'd ever been told they were less than. She would tell them about the shelters she built, the laws she changed, the kingdom she helped transform. But most of all, she would tell them about the moment she realized she was enough. Not because a king chose her, not because she passed impossible tests or won over hostile packs, but because she chose herself. Because she looked at all the cruelty and rejection and pain she'd endured, and instead of letting it break her, she used it to build something better. The northern dominions flourished under their joint rule. The shelters expanded to every settlement. Half-bloods served in the highest positions of government. The old prejudices didn't disappear overnight. They lingered in corners and whispers, but they lost their power to define lives and limit possibilities. And through it all, Illyra ruled with the wisdom she'd learned from surviving the unsurvivable. She was fierce when she needed to be, compassionate always, and absolutely certain that every wolf deserved a chance to prove their worth. She was the queen who changed everything, the girl nobody wanted who became the woman everyone needed. And her story, the story of survival and transformation, of facing impossible odds and emerging victorious, became legend. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing in the world is a person who refuses to accept the limitations others place on them. Someone who looks at an impossible situation and finds a way through. Someone who survives not just to exist, but to thrive. Someone who proves that the measure of a wolf, or a queen, isn't found in bloodline or breeding, but in the strength of their heart and the courage of their choices. Illyra Valmer had been that someone, and she had transformed not just herself, but an entire kingdom. All because one night, a king crossed a crowded ballroom for the girl no one wanted, and she was brave enough to take his hand,